All right. Good evening. It being a little bit late, 8:40 p.m. on Tuesday, November 29th, I think it is. This is a special workshop of the New Durham Planning Board to discuss the CIP committee. As normal, we're going to go quickly around the room here and introduce ourselves. Start on my left.
Laura Zusko, Administrative Assistant.
Scott Drummy, the chair.
Bob Craycraft, Vice Chair.
David Swenson, Selectman Representative.
Doug Vizel, Member.
Terry Chabot, member.
Jeff Allen, alternate member.
Great. If there are any questions from the audience, I think we have Greg Antes here as the CIP selectman member for the CIP. Do you have any comments you want to make to start us off, or not specific to what we're going to cover, just anything general at all?
No, not at this time. I think all of you did get the CIP report.
Yep.
And I hope that you went through it thoroughly and read it all.
Yep. Okay. All right. I'm not sure how we want to proceed here. I have a couple major topics I want to cover. I guess I'll just make a brief general summary. And then I'll let ourselves go around the room here and people can add or subtract from my general summary. I have three issues I want to cover tonight. One is a lack of specifics in the report itself. In my opinion, overall, the CIP committee is recommending a nearly 90-degree turn in how major capital expenses are funded. And they're not providing, in my opinion, enough specific factual information to justify that turn. My second issue is that the whole purpose of the CIP, Capital Improvement Plan, is to amortize large capital expenses across multiple years, so our tax rate doesn't go up and down like a yo-yo every year when a big expense comes up. We put a few bucks, maybe more than a few bucks, in different accounts every year, and when the huge expense comes up, it is completely or almost completely paid for already. It's how it should work, in my opinion. My third point that I want to cover is that I found several. They're not substantive to most extent, but there are several significant typos in the report that need to be addressed. We can get into more specifics on those issues later, but I'd like to get the opinion of the rest of the board about if you agree with that, you have other issues, or what, so we know where we're going.
I missed the last meeting, so I am somewhat at a disadvantage in perhaps not being part of that discussion, but the lack of specifics is something that stood out for me too. And the format of this is just different than previous CIP reports, so that threw me off, but the lack of specifics is definitely a deficiency in my opinion.
I have several different things. First of all, I do agree with your opening statements. The typos, of course, we can take care of pretty quickly, but the other two I think are substantive concerns, and I agree with them. I also have several other things, which I don't know if you want to do that under this
Generally,
scenario,
just generally.
or if you want to come back into specifics, I can get into specifics.
Let's just get a general.
Just to give you a general comment, I sense that there may have been a lack of understanding between, within the CIP committee, or certain members of it anyway, between what a CRF is versus whether the need is there to establish a new CRF versus suggesting spending on a particular capital item which is not necessarily a new CRF funding. In other words, as an example, a couple examples for each of those. The concern that I had relative to the understanding of CRF versus establishing newer CRF could be, an example would be the command car. Currently, there are no CRFs that would cover a command car. And so they made a recommendation to purchase the command car without a recommendation to either establish a new CRF or to reword the current CRF through a warrant article change. So I think that, to your point, is lack of specifics. That's an example, perhaps, also. There are, I would call incongruities between the table that's in the front versus in the narrative. And for that, as an example, I might use the library, in which there was a $5,000 recommendation, I think, in the narrative, and then there was an $8,000 or so, $7,500, $8,000, sorry, for carpet and painting, et cetera, which, again, wasn't clear whether they were looking at it using the existing CRF and do funding to it, or just
Right.
suggesting that it be purchased and didn't really address from the CIP
Right.
side of it. Again, there are several other details, but that gives you kind of specific example on the general comment that I think there's some perhaps lack of understanding among some of the CIP members that were in the decision majority at any rate, relative to the difference between CRFs and spending, or out of those CRFs or establishing new CRFs.
Okay.
That's one. Two is that I was not aware that there was going to be a handout showing the TA recognition and all that, so I prepared one, and I additionally added the first column, by the way, of numbers, you can ignore. That was an exhibit from my initial notes from meeting attendance, so it's really the second two columns, i.e. original CIP recommendation, and what I call the antes changes, which was the majority vote on those changes. And then in the comments, you'll find what the current balance is and maybe a couple of other comments. In other words, this may be a little bit more complete than the table you have. I made some handwritten adjustments based on what the handout was that we just got tonight, i.e. the meeting house and roads for the original CIP. I did not have those in initially. So I made those handwritten changes. So this is, that column matches what you have basically. I think the next column more or less matches what you have. The new piece is what the current balance is, all on one page with some additional comments. The third point I would have is that it was noted but wasn't made a significant enough piece of information, I think, and that is there is no recommended funding for any highway trucks, which I think, to your point,
Right.
causes a lot of concern, because even if you pick a lease purchase option, which we've done in the past, the town has done lease purchase offers, they've
Right.
done leasing, so it's nothing new there, but there should have been some acknowledgement of what that cost would be longer term, as an example,
Right.
for a lease purchase, so
Right.
that we can assure that we're funding even that part correctly. So that's, again, a little bit detail in
Yep.
some cases, but an overview nevertheless.
Yep.
I have quite a bit more detail as we get it through.
Okay.
Do you want comments from me on any of this, or do you want?
Let's go general around the table here first,
Okay.
and we can get, if you have general comments that
Or
are
specific comments?
not specific yet, let's just go general around once.
Okay.
Dot, do you have anything?
Okay, I totally agree with what everyone has said. And I guess I would add to that I just see a fundamental lack of alignment between the CIP and the master plan itself. And they are companion documents. Funding the highway truck is a prime example. The CIP and the forum input for the CIP, not the CIP, the master plan and the forum input that we receive clearly indicate a interest in keeping the level of service consistent with what it's been. And just adhering to that model, and I don't see that reflected in the CIP.
Okay,
In fact, it was not reflected.
okay. Terry, do you have anything?
I can only say that I was on the CIP committee last year, and this year, just from reading the report, it seemed pretty straightforward, and I thought it was pretty similar to what happened last year. There was the same conversations about roads, same conversations about trucks, leasing, and all of
Right.
that. I don't know, I'm just wondering what the big thing was that you thought was, what in your opening comment, what you meant by that,
Okay,
a
I'll
large
go over
thing,
that.
because I don't really know what you mean by that.
I'll go over that.
Yep.
Okay,
But to me, it seems like we're talking still about the same things, we're still getting stuck on the same things, and, this is, to me, was all a recommendation. I'm just assuming that the Board of Selectmen is gonna make a recommendation? Do
And the
they-
budget committee,
And
based
then
on
it goes basically
both
to
of
the
them,
budget
yeah.
committee, and then the budget committee decides what they're going to put in our town, in the budget for
right.
the town. So this is all just, I guess, just going over it and over it, that's all.
Okay,
I echo your comments, Scott, and Selectman Swenson. And what I'm concerned about, and I'm very anxious to hear your perspective, because I don't have either the history, nor do I have the understanding of what the process was here. But it looks to me like, from what we've heard, especially last week and now coming in this week, there are two major changes being proposed here. One is the savings versus borrowing. And I'd like to talk, when we get to specifics, about the lease purchase concept. I don't see leasing, I just see borrowing money and paying it back over time.
Right.
And that may be the right thing to do, but if it is, that's what it is, we should call it what it is. But I see this big change where in the past, as you said, we saved money, and when we needed a new truck, we paid cash and bought it. And that's what the town's used to, and that's what we've done. And there's now an attempt to stop saving and to borrow money and pay it back later. And I don't think we know from here what the real impact of that is.
Mhm.
And the second one is what Selectman Swenson mentioned, no highway truck savings. And what I wonder about is that not just a matter of not saving for highway trucks, but is that a matter of developing a system whereby we're going to privatize the highway department? And there's been a lot of discussion about that. I don't think that's a new topic. But both of those, to me, are really big and important changes. And do they belong here? Is that really what this process should be doing? Or is that something that should be debated and discussed and perhaps voted upon? Because even though this will ultimately be voted on, it's going to be voted on as part of a big budget. And you're not going to call out the fact that I really don't want to privatize the highway department if that's how someone should feel, unless you vote against the entire town budget. And that's really not a realistic way to do it. So I just worry about the process. And I'm not questioning whether the ideas are the right ideas or the wrong ideas. Does the town support it or not? I don't know. But I'm just wondering, is this the right process, and is there a better process where this can be debated openly and people can vote on it?
Let me make one comment to you. In actuality, the capital stuff will likely be separate warrant articles, so that you'll have the operating budget as one warrant article, and then you'll have these capital funding portions. Sometimes it's done in a combination, sometimes they're done separately, depending on what they are, if there needs to be additional information. As an example, the roads likely will be a separate, our warrant article, which describes how much will come from the CRF, how much will come from the highway block grant, and how much will come from tax, raised taxes. There'll be likely a warrant article, again, following a pattern we've done in the past, likely a warrant article which combines multiple capital requests. But your bottom line is correct, that even under that scenario, there's no real explanation to the voters that the highway trucks aren't funded and it means this.
I mean, it strikes me that the question, I've heard this bandied about in town and with people I know, should the highway department be privatized? It's a perfectly legitimate question, I think, but I think it's a question that's really important and ought to be debated. And if what's going on here is an attempt to implement that without the full understanding of the voters and the consent of the voters, then I wonder if we shouldn't take a different process.
Okay.
Well said.
Yep, absolutely, Joe.
Well said.
Good. I wasn't sure.
Okay. Greg, do you have any more?
Yeah, I'll answer that question. We did not look and wanted to privatize the highway.
Okay.
That was not our direction in this plan.
Before you start, Greg, I just got a flag. Can you sit on the front row so the camera can catch you?
Sound mostly.
Pardon me?
For the sound.
Closer to the mics.
You can't hear him?
Step up to the podium, Greg.
Can you sit up front more?
Yes.
We can't hear you.
Just turn a chair around, you can use it for a table.
Guys, pull that, hopefully that'll work. Pull that front row chair around for your table. Does that work?
That works fine. We didn't,
That better?
when we were talking about the highway department, several things came up. One was, and also the fire department. How are we going to fund these big expenditures? And in the report, it goes into that detail that we're going to add more money into the fire department because those expenditures are quite large, $300,000 to $500,000 plus. And so we funded that a higher amount. The highway department, this was Scott's recommendation that we put a zero amount on that. And so we followed through with that. Now, the reasoning we had on that was, right now we have approximately $230,507 in the capital improvement for the highway department. And then if you look at the last schedule that we have, this would be page 15, it goes into when the replacement of those trucks will be coming up. And so they're pretty far out. And the trucks range from, I don't know, anywhere from a small pickup truck going for $31,000 up to a dump truck with a plow and so forth to $100,000. So, and the plow trucks are the ones that we were looking at, focusing in on. And this has been the discussion for over 2 or 3 years. Do we want to blend? And that's what we've been calling it. Meaning, I personally, as one selectman, do not want to reduce the highway department, the personnel. And I made that very clear. However, through attrition, that would be the time that you look at the winter months where you have a short period of 5 months that you use a particular truck, and rarely do you use that truck during the other period of time. So we looked at that, and I did a study, and Tony had done a study on this, and that was, this would be the direction that we would go for a truck and a man if we lose a man, where we contract that part of the route out. And we have 5 to 6 routes during the winter, and it's approximately 10 to 11 miles per route. And so each truck and a man takes a route. And so we do bring a man in just for the winter. And this is a savings actually to us. He actually works at Pike during the spring, summer, and fall. He has nothing to do in the winter, so we hire him, and we've had him for 14 years. We hire him at a very reasonable rate, and we have him for that 5-month period, and we have a truck for him. So in a sense, that's a savings versus a full-time employee with benefits. The benefits is what's killing this town. And so we were looking at when we can start blending, where it actually saves the town money. And we were looking at this year, and it didn't save the town money this year to bring in a contractor for one scheduled area, a route. The money just didn't work out. Because we have the vehicles, we have the manpower now. So the blending really is, in my mind, is only going to work in the next 2-3 years when somebody retires or maybe someone leaves. And with the reduction of possibly 1 or 2 trucks during this period of time, and you'll see that in the one form, and this is the one that we had a scale that we put in the value of each truck and so forth. And we put, like, the Freightliner is one that would be going out of circulation very quickly because it's cost us a lot of money to maintain. Well, that would be a good truck then to have contracted out the truck and the man. And if you do that for that winter period, you will save something in the neighborhood of 15,000 to 20,000, whatever it may be, maybe more than that. So that's when the blending starts. We're not gonna rush the blending until it makes the value worth it. So when we looked at the trucks, we took an account that we are gonna be reducing some trucks to start the blending. And this would happen in the next 2 or 3 years. And if you look at the schedule on page 15, that's when you see some of these trucks rotating out and so forth. Some will purchase a truck. But the direction we like to go now is the lease purchase. And a lot of towns are going that direction. And the cost factor doesn't balloon up or down because you use a portion of the money that's already in the capital reserve fund for the down payment, which you can do. Then you borrow, and the state gives us rates. You borrow over a 5 to 10 year period and make those payments like everybody does on cars and so forth. So you don't have that big jump up or down, even though you're not purchasing outright. You're actually putting a down payment on it and running the payments out for a period of time, which is something that you get from the general fund. And so it doesn't balloon away out of line. So we looked at that as a way of reducing the cost for the town, but still maintaining the service, and that's the key. In this, we don't want to change the service. We're very pleased with the service. And then the study that we did, actually Tony did several studies on this, and then I went out and looked at this about 3 years ago. And towns are starting to do this blending or contracting out. And they do it because of an employee, the cost of a full-time employee and the benefits, and maintaining a truck and the buying it and then maintaining it is a very expensive. Where when you contract it out, that's an individual that not only does one town, but they do 2 or 3 towns, and they use that particular vehicle or truck throughout the year. So they don't put the whole burden of contracting that truck and that man out to us. So in the studies I've looked at, and I think I know Swin's looked at this a year or so ago from Tony. He gave it to all of us, the selectmen, who else he gave it to, about other towns that are going in this direction. So that's what we've been talking about for 2 or 3 years, this blending, or contracting out part of our highway department, but keeping and maintaining employees. And that's the direction I would like to go. So with the idea of that, when we're discussing that, Scott made some recommendations throughout this, and that was one of his recommendations, that we put a zero balance of putting aside money for capital reserve because we have $200,000 in it. And so we don't need to fund it. Now, this is not a new idea, this lease purchase. We've been doing this already. We lease purchased a fire truck. We lease purchased the grader. You didn't see a big spike on either one of those. They ran the payments out over a period of time. And so it stayed even. So we've already done some of the lease purchase. But we also are looking at actually doing contracted work out, where you hire a contractor and they take part of a leg of the snow removal. And if you can also get into the cost of doing culverts. Does the cost of doing a culvert for our crew to do it versus hiring it out by someone else?
Okay.
Now, this is something that we're going to have to look into. We haven't done it
Right.
yet, but that's
Yeah,
something that we
yeah.
have
Yeah,
to
we're
look
getting
at.
a little bit off.
I guess,
Yeah.
I guess.
Well,
What else?
I guess I'd like to make
Okay,
a
Dot,
comment,
go ahead.
as someone who was also on the committee. We did talk about blending, but it was blending for lease purchase, not blending for contracting out services. That was not an issue that was discussed. The context that blending was discussed in was that for the higher priced vehicles, that we continue to subsidize the fund,
Yeah.
put money in the fund at a consistent rate, with the understanding that that fund would then be used for a substantial down payment, and we would then assume the burden of borrowing the money. Not for all of them, just for the very large ones.
Right.
I want to make a couple comments, Scott. if
Okay,
I may,
fine.
just quickly, because there are several disconnects, quite frankly, Greg, in what you've said. You indicated that, and I think I'm quoting fairly quickly, it's not the reductions in the truck, it starts, the truck, it is the reduction in the trucks that starts the blending, and you don't want to reduce the highway department except when it becomes through attrition. However, you've made the statement later, which it is not the attrition that's really driving this, it's the reduction in the trucks, quite frankly. Because you've not funded any trucks for this particular one for CIP. Second point is the lease purchase, it is a viable approach for any business to look at, but it can be a shill game if not carefully and strategically and financially reviewed. And what I mean by that is the taxpayer pays a higher rate because of the interest.
Right.
They're gonna pay the interest. So you
Right.
can pay me now or pay me later, but it's a shill game. It's still gonna have to be paid
That's my
for that
problem.
amount. That doesn't mean you shouldn't use it, but that means that you have to very carefully look at it. The second part is that from a lease purchase, even if we looked at the CIP from a lease purchase point of view, which should be done, but this did not do that. You have not shown that you have sufficient funding for a lease purchase approach, for a sustainable lease purchase approach. The reason that it was fairly level in prior lease purchases is that the town had already funded CRFs to such a level that that spike wasn't going to happen.
Right.
You've not shown that your ability to do that in this
Right.
CIP, so that's my concern.
Right, I mean, when you do a lease purchase, what is the down payment? 10%, 20%,
And then what do you,
Or, I don't
and then
know.
what do you purchase it for at the end?
5 or 10 years? I don't, and what the interest rate is, I don't know.
And then what do you purchase it for at the end?
Right,
You know, they're not doing it for nothing.
right. And one thing that can, this is a specific issue, you mentioned the Freightliner is the next truck to go.
Well,
On the replacement list, it's not due to go until 2020, and the international, 2004 International is due to go in 2018.
right.
So that's one issue. Now, one thing you said, when the CIP came around last year, I thought this year we were headed down the road to contract out one truck, one route for this current year, based on last year's CIP.
That's right.
Is that happening this year, yes or no?
The numbers did not work out for this year. The numbers only work out is when you replace a truck and a van. Then when you contract it out, there's a large savings. There's another additional savings that we're doing actually right now, and that is if you have a truck already and you don't have a full-time employee, the cost
Yeah.
of that, you go into picking up somebody for just the winter months, which we have been doing for 14 years now for a particular man. That savings is significant. Even though it's our truck and we maintain it, the savings off of that employee is quite a
Because he's
bit.
only paid hourly when there's a winter
Well, I
storm.
think you're losing sight of the fact that you have a core workforce that is able to cover the majority of the work, and you're using that
Right.
individual as what I call a surge, when you have
When there's a
surge
big
needs
storm or
like winter
something.
No,
storms.
actually, that's wrong, Ms. Wins.
No, that
He
is
actually-
not wrong, Greg.
He actually has a route. It
Yes,
has
he
a
does.
route.
It's called winter. You don't find them in the summer. And the reason you can do that is that you have a core workforce which handles the rest of those routes.
But he's one of the core for the winter,
I
and
understand
he
that.
takes the route.
That's what I said.
Okay,
Okay, well,
okay,
okay, so these are things that we've looked at. These are things that we've had in studies that we've looked at. And this is what towns are going to, this lease purchase. Now, it's not way out of line. You
No.
don't get the spikes, you get an even amount each year. So it's either you're paying up front now, or you pay partial of that money and then run it out
Right.
with the rest of the time. It's maybe a little higher if you have a lease purchase, maybe, but
you
then.
got interest.
Yeah, you have interest. but you have interest that you buy a state truck and money,
Well,
You do that anyway.
you do that anyway.
Yeah,
but
So
you all,
that's a wash.
that's correct.
It's not even a wash, it's the same thing.
It's the same thing.
well, it's a
But-
savings without the interest.
Right.
But you also get rates from the state. to
You get that
borrow.
anyway.
You get that anyway if you're buying it from the state with money the town already has, or if you're buying it with a state lease purchase. There's no difference.
And that's my point. Rather than going to a bank that'll charge you more interest, this is a lesser amount.
But you still have to pay some interest
Well,
with
sure,
lease.
no
That's the
one's gonna give
difference.
us it for free.
Actually, the lease usually is more interest than a bank. Lease purchase.
Yeah, my
contracts are
biggest
usually
problem
more
is,
interest than a
you
bank.
said, I mean, you
Not always.
have done these studies,
Oftentimes.
that's fine, but they're not in here.
The empirical data
Right.
isn't here.
So I haven't seen those studies, and most other people haven't seen those studies. They've been given to the Board of Selectmen at some time
Well, they're
in the
incomplete.
past couple of
Now,
years.
let's
Or-
be fair,
or-
here. Those studies are not complete. They are
Whatever they are.
cherry-picked information. and you're
Whatever,
right.
yeah, whatever they are, they're not in here, in this report. So there's no,
There's no
you can't
overall
make a
strategic-
judgment on
yeah,
it.
there's
This,
no
this
overall
whole,
strategic
the whole
plan.
purpose of this document is to make a judgment call, a recommendation based on fact on how to go forward. And
Right.
that data isn't in here. That's my single biggest problem with this report this year. You started the idea last year with contracting out, and I thought that, and I agreed with the idea with one truck to start this year as an experiment, see how it happens. Now that's not happening, so we're not gonna see how that flushes out.
But
I mean,
Yeah,
it would
yeah.
almost been worth it to leave a truck in the garage
Just to
and make
sure
the
you-
contract to see what happens.
So you have, make sure you have the full
It's a
information.
man and a
Just wait a
truck.
minute, so you have, make sure you have the full information. Actually, last year, we put out an RFP for a contracted route, and nobody bid on it. This year, we looked at it again, and it wasn't financially feasible to do that. It cost the town more money.
Okay,
It would not be a smart business decision to do it.
okay.
So that's my point, is that there's no strategic, longer-term financial analysis of
Yeah,
what
I'm
the
not seeing it.
implied results are for the CIP information.
I'm
Well,
not seeing it.
we're talking actually two things now here. You're talking, do you lease purchase, which we've done before. We did it with a grader, we did it with a fire truck. So that's already been done.
I disagreed with both of those, but
Okay, but we did it and it worked out fine. The second thing we're talking about here is when the attrition happens, which is going to happen, you're going to drop a truck and an employee is going to retire or leave.
not
So that's-
necessarily the same year.
Or you.
And the board of selectmen may choose to replace rather than have the attrition
Replace the
happen.
truck or the person,
Depends
so,
on the
you know.
composition of the board of
Yes,
selectmen.
those two
But-
things
but
will
you're-
happen, but they're independent from each other. Let's just make
That's
that point
correct.
clear,
That's correct.
okay?
They may be independent. of
They
one
may or
another.
may not.
If-
There's
if
no
you-
reason to say they'll happen at the same time.
Well,
Put it a different way, they're not codependent.
Correct.
Very good. I'll buy that.
well, when I looked at this, and you look at the schedule of replacement, and you look at the possible employees that will be retiring or leaving for one purpose or the other, they will coincide eventually.
Well,
And that's the time that I think you should start the blending. I want to do the blend, I agree with you. I want to do the blending this year, but the money, there's no reason to do blending unless it saves you money.
obviously.
Yeah,
But
so we're not going to rush into blending just to prove a fact that we can contract out. That doesn't do any good for the town. The only reason you contract out is you're going to save money on it.
right, but if,
This is a 10-year, this is a tomorrow. This is a 10-year plan. And we looked at this over a 10-year period of what trucks are gonna be pulled out of rotation. We can pull out of rotation. And what employees will be able to retire and leave. So we did look at it, this is a 10-year plan that we're looking at. We're not looking at next year, maybe, or the following year.
Well,
So,
let him speak.
so anyway, but we do want to start this idea of not purchasing outright, and we have a page on that, about there's 5 issues that you can do. You can rent out a piece of equipment, you can lease out a piece of equipment, you can lease purchase, you can purchase or contract out. And you could actually, if you want to go 6, you can actually start talking to other towns and saying, you buy the grader, and we'll buy this front loader. So both towns don't have two pieces of equipment that are expensive, and you can work with the town about grading our dirt roads, and we'll use the grader for that. That's something that's very difficult to do.
Yeah.
So we didn't include that, and that's why. But the other 5 are viable. And we're saying, let's start looking in the next 10 years of using those 4 other sources for equipment. And that's what we're seeing in this report. The other thing that we don't put in this report, but it has been in some other reports, we pay more money to maintain our roads than other towns do. And there's a reason.
We have, but from what I've heard and from other people, we have better roads.
Better road maintenance, yeah.
Oh, okay, I've heard the same thing, so I got in my truck and drove to these other towns and drove their dirt roads and drove their hard surfaces. They were very similar to ours. And I'm not, we have a great crew there, and I don't want to break them up or cause any discord. In fact, we saved an employee. He was going to leave, and we worked with that employee to save him and keep him here. And he was a key essential employee. So this idea that, you know, we want to break up the highway department, get rid of employees, is just a false statement. And you know, we need to put that to rest of privatizing. But we eventually have to get into, I believe, into contracting out. And there's a way to do it to save money for the town.
That is called privatizing, in case you were wondering.
No, I know that.
Okay,
Thank you.
just want to make sure you're clear.
Thank you, Swins, I appreciate that. But anyway, so when you look at this and you read each page and so forth, there is an explanation of why we're looking this way, why we came up with this idea. That's why we put in these last 2 pages that gives you the capital expenditures in these different departments now. And it also gives you when these trucks will be coming, rotating out.
Right.
So we looked at all that. Now, you mentioned about how we titled certain funding. One of them is there were when the different department heads came to us and said, this is what we want funded. We looked at each department head and said, okay. And I'll give you an example of the Parks and Rec. They want to do a new playground area, which costs $15,000. What we worked out with them is, you know, see it in the report, is $7,500 this year and $7,500 next year. They will have to get bids and so forth. Some of those monies will be coming in from different funds and capital improvement and so forth. But we want to recognize that there are some funding here that really doesn't fall within the capital improvement, because that it has to be over 10 grand for a piece of equipment. But under that, people are asking for money. So we put that in this report saying this might be something that will have to go in under a warrant article of just flat out, we're going to raise this kind of money for this particular, if you want to raise this money for this, that we'll put it in the general fund rather than the other 2 funding sources. So, you know, you know, so we get
Keep moving.
several of us have a good background, have a lot of research on this. We didn't put all that in the report because they haven't in the past, and we didn't want to weigh it down. But the idea is there, and that's what we're trying to express. This is a new idea, a 10-year idea to start working this in. And that's all we're asking, and to look at that and to see if this is something you want to do or would consider.
Well, as I indicated before, this is really not a new idea. We've done it many times, the town's done it many times in the past. But let's get to some specifics here. I
Right.
think it's time to,
Yeah.
let me make a couple of comments on,
Sure, go ahead.
on some specifics here. I would turn your attention to page 5 of the CIP.
Yep. Okay.
Um,
Okay.
We've already know that there's no recommended funding for the highway truck, which I have some concern on without a more thorough financial analysis and a strategic, longer-term strategic plan of how that will work. So that's number one. But if I go down as an example, you have on this table a list of CRFs, and these are CRFs that currently, and ETFs, which currently exist, and then you have, I don't know what the Board of Selectmen is, I don't know what that line is, but then you have another thing called 2017 requests. When I walked through the narrative on this and then looked at this, there were several disconnects here. As an example, I mentioned one of them, but let's go on from the top down here. If I go down to road construction, as an example, they're suggesting a $50,000 CRF funding. There's nothing in the narrative which describes that. There is road construction, but it's $340,000, which appears down below there. There's no narrative that says what that 50,000, why, how it fits into the overall current balance, et cetera. So for me, that was a disconnect. If I continue on then down to the ETF, town building improvements, that's listed as a CRF in the narrative. Probably just a typo or something perhaps, but that's listed as CRF, but it really is an ETF. I don't know what the Board of Selectmen line is, but then if I go down to the request side, on the recreation playground equipment, that's listed as a CRF in the narrative, which then I would have expected up above somewhere under that CRF listings.
Yeah.
Except that if it requires a new warrant article, but that's not defined in there.
Yeah,
The next line, the library, which is the $8,000 for exterior paint and interior carpet, that's also listed as a CRF in the narrative. Again, I would have expected that either as a statement that it needs a new CRF and appearing up there with a comment or some such thing as that.
that's what that's.
So I interpreted these as being what they're suggesting for expenditures for 2017. And then CRFs would be, the top CRF and ETF lines would be those that they're suggesting for funding into those funds. That's where I came up with my comment.
that
It really wasn't
correct?
clear.
The CI 2017 requests are specific requests for purchases next year?
I'm
Is that
sorry.
correct?
Where are you now again?
Page 5,
I got it.
bottom of page 5, 2017
requests?
requests.
Okay.
Are those specific requests to be purchased next year
The,
out of some CRF that isn't specifically mentioned, but we can guess?
Those are set up to set aside money that can be put in either the CRF
Yeah,
or not. And I'll give you the example. The fire command car is $60,000.
okay. I'm a little
We
confused on
set
that.
it, well, let me finish.
Yeah,
We set that in that request differently than putting it up into the fire department equipment funding
yeah,
because the truck fund, the CRF truck fund for the fire department does not specify a command car. So we can't use that money for a command car.
is it that specific?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I mentioned that as part of my, I've mentioned that as part of my
Yeah.
general stuff, but what I'm saying here is that,
May I finish?
no, because I have to respond to this. What I'm saying here is that those then become an expenditure for next year. There should have been some narrative that said, need to establish or change wording to the current warrant article.
Right.
Unless you knew some of that detail, you
Right.
wouldn't be able to read this
Right.
report effectively.
Okay,
Right.
so can I explain what I was going
Go ahead.
to talk about the command car? Without a warrant article, changing the warrant article from just truck, funding the fire trucks for the CRF, we have to then include trucks and vehicles. But that has to pass. If that doesn't pass, then we still have to replace the command car. So that's why it was put down on the requests and not put into the CRF.
That goes to my comment that I think there's some misunderstanding or lack of understanding in many of the CIP members that didn't understand how the process works. that
Okay.
you-
Well, that
was one of the reasons I came to that
This was
conclusion.
brought
There
up.
are many others.
This was brought up, Scott recommended these, and we ran with them.
All right.
And his explanation,
I would challenge that Scott recommended every one of those, but that's.
This is
that's just-
Scott's work
That's just
right
my
here.
understanding.
but this page 5 is Scott Pinnant's work.
Okay. I have a related question, but I thought, what I thought was the old command car was red. and it's gone.
No, that,
There's been a white one out being
that's
used for the
that's
last
old-
year or two.
That's
We
the old police
converted a
car.
police, let me take care of this. We converted a police vehicle that was no longer being used as a police department vehicle to a command car because the command car that was there for the fire department basically lived its life.
It was dead in the
gone.
water a year ago,
It was
maybe
gone. Yeah, it was about a,
year and a half or
probably
something.
about a year, probably, yeah,
Okay,
That was
so that was a used police car converted,
correct.
so it's still old.
It's still
Well-
relatively old, yeah.
Was
Okay,
due to
I get it
be-
now.
was due
Fine.
to be replaced in 2018.
That's fine.
Yeah.
My question's answered. I don't need any more. That's fine. I
I
thought we
think
had a
there-
brand
I
new
think there's
vehicle,
still-
why wouldn't, do we
I
need
think there's
another
still
brand new
discussion on
vehicle?
whether it needs to be done in 17 or 18. I think that's the
Okay.
issue.
That's,
The issue is not that we should not be funding the CRF,
Right.
for including command car, or changing the wording in that article. That's not the issue. I think
Right.
we have to
Okay.
address that. The issue is,
okay,
when should that happen in terms of its replacement?
okay. Yeah,
Well, that is, the command, if we're going to stay on the command car.
Yeah.
The command car that we now have, the reason we moved it from the police department over to the fire department and spent that money is, we could not use the money from the CRF to pay for a new command car. So we had that vehicle as an extra vehicle that we could utilize. That vehicle, actually, that year, last year, was to go out of the rotation. So that's on borrowed time.
It was to go out in 2018.
And the expenses that we're now spending on that are adding up quite a bit. And we knew that would happen if we keep that particular vehicle. That particular vehicle has a limited amount of time, and it becomes very expensive to maintain.
There is a misstatement that's been made. That vehicle was not scheduled to go out last year. We actually did the repairs and did the conversion, understanding that it would last another 2 to 3 years.
But
the current one,
The one that we converted.
The one that-
right, the current one.
that,
It's
yeah.
the white vehicle.
Yes, we have a difference of opinion on that.
Well,
And the
Check the
difference-
minutes.
Yeah, the difference of opinion is that that vehicle, from our mechanics have said, that vehicle has troubles. As they get older, they get very expensive to maintain. So the expense that you, going back to the lease purchase, the expenses that you're gonna spend on that vehicle can be greater than if you went out and lease purchased a vehicle and paid the payments for that year.
all right. I get let's try and solve this singular issue
That's why I
right
said
here
get
and
back to
now.
the detail.
Okay.
How do we solve this singular issue? Do we recommend a change in the fire truck capital reserve fund as a warrant article? Yes or no?
Yes, we will be putting that on a
I think the
warrant.
question is to the planning board. I assume the question was to. the
That was
planning
my
board.
question.
Yeah,
Yes, because that's not what, the CIP doesn't even mention that.
right.
So
Yeah,
it sounds
I
like
think
that's what we
needed,
want, what
absolutely.
should be recommended,
It
right?
needs to be a command car, we need to have
So-
a provision for it.
I don't have the
Well, the-
narrative for the CRF, so I don't know what wording needs to change.
Right.
But can,
But the
let's just,
recommendation, yeah, but the recommendation, if there's consensus in the planning board, the recommendation would be to do one of two things. Either modify or revise the current warrant articles approved wording, or establish a new CRF specifically to command cars and other non-fire truck vehicles.
I don't
So
think that makes
that's
sense.
the option. Those are the two options, I should say.
Where did the last command car come from? Does anyone know?
The red one,
The red one.
did we just use the CRF incorrectly? 10 whatever years ago?
Can't answer that question, yeah.
It's probably a
Yeah.
Don't know.
moot point.
Yeah, I
I'm
mean,
just
but it
curious.
is an interesting question.
Where did it come from? But okay.
So I'm not clear on what the issue is. It says here that the CIP committee recommends $60,000 for a fire command car
Right.
in 2017.
The problem is, there's no CRF that exists that can be used to put that $60,000 into and then buy the command car. The current fire truck CRF is worded in a way that does not allow the purchase of a command car.
Okay.
A command car is not a fire truck.
Understood, but can this not be handled by the selectmen?
No,
We have
No.
to handle this?
no. The CRFs are town meeting created funds. If you modify them, it has to be done at town meeting.
Okay,
Now,
so-
if we, if we raise the 60,000, we could put it in general fund and pull it out of general fund to pay for the vehicle, if the warrant article doesn't pass. Somebody's gonna put the warrant article upcoming in March. This, if two other, the budget or this doesn't, the Board of Selectmen was gonna do it and change it. It needs to be done. And we talked about this last year with the trustees. Some towns allow you, even though it says truck, fire truck, or the CRF, they do allow you to take the money out of that for the command car. Others do not.
Is that a,
Depends on the wording of the article.
Yeah.
So-
is that a
so
specific
is it-
wording issue, or is it just an interpretation of the town, or is it something that the state municipal, what do you call it,
Scott seemed to
MRE
be-
says can be done?
Scott Kinman seemed to be pretty emphatic that, yeah, we could not take it
Yeah.
out of the CR.
Because of the wording of the current article.
Right.
Right. Well,
So
And
then
Carter
we-
was the same way, so that's why we're headed.
Okay.
That's why it's pulled out of the CRF,
all right,
and it's not going to
all right.
the truck fund, the fire truck fund.
And I think the warrant article should include the provision that it be subject to a mechanic's report. In other words, if we're voting to fund this in 2017,
Right.
it should be
Right.
subject to mechanics.
Well, I mean, if whether or not we replace the command car next year is still irrelevant to the fact that we need to change the CRF.
Yes.
Correct.
Yes,
So,
That's correct.
okay.
The
Let's-
warrant article has to be changed.
okay.
Correct.
So do we all in agreement?
There's two parts. One is that, planning board, if there's consensus, should recommend, this is one of those two options. And then the next decision is, what is the recommendation for funding that CRF
Right.
as a warrant, as part of that warrant article?
So,
As part of another
assuming
warrant
that's,
article.
needs
That would be a
60
separate-
grand.
This would be a different warrant article.
we're in fire department, where are we? Fire CRF, fire truck, there's 340 there, 395, 396 in there. I mean, my biggest problem with this is things are not being amortized across.
395.7, yeah.
Right. So, I don't even know where it is,
What are you looking for?
the command car and the
It's-
page
it's
15
not.
list.
It's not there.
It's not there at all.
No.
No,
There it is, Ford, about halfway down, Ford Expedition C1. There it is,
Yeah, it's there.
2008. I mean, this is the problem with things not being added $5,000 a year for every vehicle in these funds. There are several items in the fire truck fund. They all cost a lot of money. So you're supposed to go across the whole lifetime of the truck,
Right,
17, whatever,
right.
$10,000 a year over its lifetime, that money should go in for every vehicle every year.
If you look on page 8, the fire department capital reserve fund, our recommendation was to put $40,000 in that.
Right. But based on this page 15, it's
But that's
not,
a-
the numbers aren't there across the
But
board.
that's the fire truck capital reserve.
You know what I
fund.
mean?
Right.
There should be a spreadsheet that has your replacement cost per year across every year, and then in a
We-
bold number, here's the replacement of it in this year.
Right.
You know what I mean? That's not there, so it's hard to tell
Right.
how much you're building every year.
Yeah.
That's how these used to be done.
Well.
In previous
it-
years, those numbers were always there.
It does
And it
have
was easy to
replacement.
tell.
It does have replacement costs.
I know, but it's easy, if you put it in, if you put every number in for every year, for every vehicle, and every fund, you just have to go to the bottom and say, bam, that's how much money we need.
That's right, and we have.
And it's not there, it's
we
not
have
in the
that-
sheet.
Wait, we have that, we have a form.
Well, it's not on this sheet, it's not in this report.
That's right.
So that's my
Because
problem.
The committee wanted to pull that one out and put this one in.
Well, all right. If,
That was
sounds
part
like
of-
you need the money, so
Well,
without
the other
knowing
part
any
is that
better
there's-
details,
I don't think there's any narrative on the command car in the narrative part of it,
No.
but it is listed under the requests.
I know, that's,
So again, that's my point, is that I think there's some
Absolutely.
misunderstanding between,
yeah, there's a
Well, we
lot
don't have
of,
any place to put it, that's why.
you put it right in the narrative.
Pardon me?
You put it straight in the fire department narrative.
or you put another subsection there saying you need to create a new CRF.
This needs to be
blah,
done
blah, blah,
for the fire department. Bam. X, Y, Z. I mean, you know, that's what you put in the narrative. Most of the narrative should include what the fund is for, and that is there in the narrative for just about every account. But the specific issues for this year should also be in the narrative for every account. In some cases they are, in some cases they're not.
I think, I think what you may want to do, because I think the objective here is to come up with what the planning board recommend.
Right,
For numbers, right?
right,
So I think probably what you want to do is go line by line and just say,
yeah.
you know, inputs and,
Yeah.
just a suggestion, I'm just.
Yeah, to get through this,
In the
I
interest
think
of time.
that's what we need to do. So, do we want to be formal and go motions with everything here, or just get a consensus and motion the final document when we're done?
To the end, final document in the end.
Well, yeah, I think you may well need to play that one a little bit by ear, because some may be no issues, some may be a concern.
Okay, if we just, if I just go with general consensus and we all say yay, then I'll move forward. If there's a contest, then I'll
Mhm.
call for a motion and we'll vote on it. Okay, so, fire department
So
capital
let
reserve
me make one other point.
fund,
To the point that I've made, that the CRF ETF sections on that table versus the request sections on the table,
right,
I'm suspecting we should treat all of them as CRF ETF as opposed to this is what we'd like to spend kind of deal, which is really how this is presented.
Well,
So let me,
Yeah. let him finish, then I'll let you comment in a minute, Greg.
So I'm assuming that, as an example, the CRF ETF's line items are pretty straightforward. If you
Right.
get down to the last section there,
Requests,
yeah, I'm suggesting that maybe we just say that's still CRF ETF combination.
right, that, for the, like the first line, 2017 fire command car, 60,000, that should move up to
Well,
the second
what
line
I'm
item.
saying is, you just call it, you know, it's just CRF, and then put a note that says, in this case, we suspect either a new CRF or a wording change is required.
Right,
But you can't do it now until that passes in March. And that's why the requests were put in that, the reason requests were put down here and not in the ETFs and CRFs, because they don't necessarily go into either one of those categories.
That's not
But-
true.
But, not all of
Let him
them. But
have-
you have to recognize that this was a request from some departments. We want to recognize and set aside some money for those.
okay,
And, you know, it's supposed to hit that 10,000, but as you look down there, you see recreation playground equipment, that's $7,500,
But-
that's under 10. The library painting and carpet replacement, that's $8,000. So those were put down in those departments, the last one being the road projects of 340,000. Well, we spelled out that that has to get on a warrant article, and we explained how much is going to be on the warrant article and how much we're going to get from grant, the state
Right.
grant. So that's in the explanation part.
okay,
The-
let's,
Just quickly, one follow-up point to, the only two that require a different warrant article concept is the
Yeah.
command car and the recreation equipment. One command car, either a wording change or a new CRF, and the recreation equipment would be a new CRF.
really need, no, really?
What, wouldn't that?
The
come under
recreation
the
equipment is
ball
not
field?
considered part of the ball fields.
Yeah, it's
It's
listed
not-
under ball field.
Really?
Not the way that I understood the
Walk in-
warrant article wording is.
You come in from the road and it
I
says
understand,
Smithfield
I
Ball.
understand. But I think that warrant article is a warrant article, Smith Ballfield improvements. One could argue that's there, I think you could go back to the wording. But those are, what I'm saying is, those are the only two
Alright.
that potentially consider CRF
Right, the
modifications.
highway
or
tow
moves.
room,
The
that's
rest
just
of them
highway
fit-
equipment.
The rest of them all fit in the CRF.
Yeah.
So what I'm saying is, on the last ones, consider those part of the CRFs, just keep going down line by line and then yea or
Right.
nay and all that.
All right, so let's stick to the command car for 1 minute here. Option one, we get on the town warrant. There's a new warrant, or a warrant article that recommends a change to the description of the fire CRF or fire vehicles.
That's right.
That's
Option one.
assume that's first article on the warrant.
Right.
Well, it's not the
Assuming,
first article, but
whatever,
it's- yeah.
it's ahead of what I'm
Yeah,
gonna
yeah,
say
yeah.
next. Okay, that is approved. Somewhere else down the line after that, we've done this before, if A is approved, then B happens. We've
There's-
done that before.
There's a
at town
variety of
meeting.
ways to do it. You can do it all in one article, saying, create an article and fund it to 60,
True,
or modify the wording and fund it to 60, or whatever the combination
Right.
dollars are. Or change the wording and then another article, fund it. I mean, there's a variety of ways. That's really the Board of Selectmen's decision
right, all right.
on how that's gonna do it. I think the planning board's decision is, what's the recommendation for the level of
Funding.
funding for that, whatever it is.
All right, so.
So
Then is it the consensus of the board that we want to replace the command car
Yes.
next year, or if the mechanic says it's okay the year after, sometime
See, the
soon?
decision isn't,
When it
again, you have to
gets
differentiate
replaced.
between the decision to expend versus the decision to fund. For planning boards is a recommendation to fund, I should
Fund.
say.
To fund for the,
Yes.
Right.
Okay.
Eventually, it's
And
your
you're
last
recommending
yes.
right,
Yes,
Hate to be that.
you're right,
nitpicky,
you're right,
but you
all
have to
right,
be
all
kind
right.
of-
So,
we want the money set aside.
right, we want to add,
We're good, we're good.
okay,
We're
right?
in.
We want to go with that, so,
The other one is, it's 3 points. One is the wording change consensus. 2 is to be funded at a level, and 3 is what should that level, should it be 60 or another number?
well, I assume the $60,000 is what a new command car costs,
I assume.
roughly.
That's
Yeah.
right.
You
But
said
you're also
yes.
assuming,
That comes from.
by fully
Well,
funding,
it comes
you're
from-
assuming
He went
it's a
out, paid
fairly
out command cars.
quick purchase as opposed to a 2-year purchase. Just,
Yes, I am
and
assuming
and I
that.
think that's where the issue is just what's the level of funding that the planning board wants to do?
The reason we did it.
I'd say let's do
We-
what the CIP came up with at
When
a
I
$60,000
asked
funding.
about that, Scott Kinman said, realistically, the vehicle would cost about $40,000. They would put it out to bid,
Yeah.
but he felt that's what it would cost, with $20,000 of equipment and improvements,
Right,
and, you know, the lights and everything.
right.
He said it
Lights
cost
and radios.
$20,000 to
Yeah.
outfit the vehicle.
A full,
We did not want to take the 60,000 from the truck, fire department truck fund. Even if we change the wording to add the command car, we want that money set aside in the large budget, so that if it passes, it'll go into that fund. If it doesn't, it'll stay in the general fund, and we'll pay it out of general fund. That's why it's
It won't
sitting.
stay in the general fund, it's not in there
That
now,
doesn't
necessarily.
make sense.
But that is the
That
point.
doesn't,
That is-
I don't like that idea,
That
because if you
concerns
put the
me.
money in the general fund, the board of selectmen do anything they want.
That's what I'm saying, that's not
If you
necessarily. in the
target
general.
it into the CRF where it belongs, then it can only be spent for that purpose.
So to explain Greg's point, he was correct, but needed a little bit further explanation. If the Board of Selectmen chose to use general fund monies to purchase a command car, that can be done because the Board of Selectmen has the authority to expend
Expend.
general fund.
Yeah,
Okay, for a purpose.
okay,
If it is decided to fund that CRF at X level, 40, 60, 30, whatever the number is, then you're right, it's very specific and it can only be used to that. So,
Yeah.
and what Greg's point here is that there is already a CRF for fire vehicles which cover fire trucks, et
Yeah.
cetera, does not cover command car.
yeah,
The CIP's wishes, majority anyway, was, if not the unanimous, was to say, yes, continue the fire truck funding part, which is that 40 up above,
yeah,
but in addition to that, we want to add, if you change the wording, 60 for the command car purpose. Now, if you only change the wording, it goes into fire trucks, that 60 can be used anywhere, but because you changed the words, it can be used for the command car.
right. Is that,
But we don't want to put it in now, because it can only go for fire trucks. And that's the key here, that's why we have it down in the request.
No, you can't work that way. You either have to have it on the warrant article or you don't. And if you don't have it on, you're not changing the wording, you can't use it.
I think that the trick is to word the warrant article in such a way that if the warrant article to change the definition of the fire truck CRF to include command cars passes, that warrant article includes $60,000 to
And that's why I
buy
said that's
the
one of the
command car.
options. That's one of the options. in the
That's how
warrant
you
article.
word it to make that happen. So I think you're trying to guarantee you get a new command car by
That's
just dumping money in the general fund. I think that's what you're trying to do.
Wherever they put this.
Well, you can't put it anywhere else.
Well, that's my point.
You either put it in the general fund or you put it in a modified fire CRF.
If it's voted, we're fine. If it's
So
voted down,
that's-
we'll be fine.
Well,
That's our whole point.
Well, that seems like cheating, doesn't it?
well,
If the town
okay.
doesn't want it, we're gonna do it anyway.
I mean, there's $350,000 in the fire truck, well, anyway.
No.
Actually, Greg has made a little bit of a misstatement here is,
Well,
if the
yeah.
CRF passes and the wording passes, yes.
Then
you
you're
are-
good.
You are fine that the command car is funded. If the CRF doesn't pass, that doesn't automatically mean the command car gets purchased, because then it becomes a board of selectmen decision.
Out of the general
Is
fund.
it in the operating funds and can
Right.
it be pulled out of that?
Right,
So it's not automatic deal, but
But we want that $60,000
right.
set aside and accounted for.
I think,
And-
knowing the townspeople, I think you have a much better chance of a warrant article passing to modify the fire truck CRF to include a command car and get 60 grand into that, than you are having a warrant article saying, give us $60,000 to put in the general fund
For a command car?
for a command, even if you say for a command car.
Which may or
By-
may not be used for a command car.
Right,
Yeah.
Transparency is always best.
right.
you
So-
would,
If I know the townspeople, they're gonna vote for option A, over option B.
you wouldn't have option B, quite frankly, because
No.
it have to be part of the operating piece, and it's not there yet.
Yeah, that doesn't make sense.
We don't need a
So let's
vote,
do option
a
A.
separate
No.
vote in the B part. The vote is A, if it doesn't pass, you still want that money.
Well, how do you get the money? You have to have a warrant article to say, we need $60,000
You can
for,
put it in the budget.
where? Under telecommunications? Where?
No, you have, we put money into the operating fund all the time. That's where you put it. And you
It doesn't
pull-
just appear out of air, though. It has to come from somewhere.
Yeah, you have
It
to.
has to come from tax revenue,
Let me
or it
walk-
has to
let me
come from
walk it
other
through.
warrant
Let me
articles.
walk it
So the
through,
budget
let me
is
walk it
voted
through
on.
quickly. Let me
That
walk it-
money will
Let me
be-
walk it through quickly. The town votes usually in Article 2 or 3, whatever it is, for the operating budget.
Right.
It's usually
And it's-
2.9 to 3.1 million,
Right.
somewhere in there, 2.8, somewhere in there.
Right,
That's composed of all the accounts.
right,
We've gone through virtually all the operating accounts already. The Board of Selectmen is, the Budget Committee is not quite finished, but almost finished
Right.
with that. Currently, this $60,000 is not in any of those budgets, at least as a current line item.
right,
They could go back in, or even deliberative session could go back in and vote saying, we want to increase the operating budget by 60 grand
right,
in the fire department.
To allow, yeah.
right.
And if it's voted, that 60 grand's in there to be expended in whatever determined by the Board of Selectmen to expend.
Right.
So that's one way, and I think that's the scenario Greg's trying to paint there.
Well, then there has to be a warrant
Second
article
part-
specifically
No,
to change the general budget item
No.
to add 60
under
grand.
that
to it.
scenario, it is not.
Then we're,
Under the other scenario, in which the planning board and Board of Selectmen would recommend to the voters potentially, a warrant article which says, change the wording of this fire truck deal,
right,
and either in the same article or in a separate article, and fund it for 60 grand,
right,
okay?
right,
That's then purposed that money specifically for fire trucks,
right,
which now, if it passes, would also
Right.
include the command car.
right.
If it doesn't pass, none of it is there.
Right. Right, I mean, the overall budget has 2.9 whatever million in it,
Right.
but there isn't just $60,000 floating around there
Let's hope
unattended.
not.
It
Let's
better
hope
not be.
No, that
Is
should
better
my
not
point.
be.
Yeah, you,
But-
over the
but you
year,
do-
maybe you can find it by cutting individual budgets over the year, maybe you could find it,
Well,
but that's not the
the
plan.
town does have some reserves, however, too. It does have unassigned fund balance reserves.
Yeah, but,
So,
That money can be put into an account that will guarantee, and
what,
then it's voted on
okay,
the
give me
big.
account, what account?
Well,
Where would you put it?
We can do account, we can throw it in the fire department account, there's several accounts we can put it in. I'm just saying, if you're looking at the big picture, that has to be in the budget when it's passed.
Oh.
Or we won't be funding the command car if it doesn't pass on the warrant.
Right.
I think, let's
we
keep
should fund
this
it.
moving.
All right,
I
let's-
think there's two things. I think the consensus was that I think the planning board had a consensus to change the wording of the warrant.
Yes.
Well,
Yes.
then
Right.
you'd add it to the 40,000.
Okay,
that
so
we're
that's one.
saving.
Part, then part two is how much? How much you want to put in there?
Let's
60.
add 60 grand. Let's,
Yep.
Okay.
that seems to be the agreed upon number. I'm
So-
not gonna get into finagling about
Just-
how much a set of lights and a radio costs.
So just from the funding point of view, consensus of the board,
You
again,
just,
my summary, and correct me if I'm
Yeah.
wrong, consensus of the board is recommend to change the current warrant article for the fire trucks to make sure it includes command car
Yeah.
applications, and then fund it at a CRF of 60 grand in
Yeah.
2017.
Yeah.
Okay,
Okay,
Plus the 40.
we're not there yet.
plus the,
Plus the 40.
We're not there yet.
40's
Now we go
in
back
the
up above.
No, the 40 is a separate
fire,
fee.
We're not
that's
there
up
yet.
here, that's on
Oh.
top.
We're not
just-
there
We're
yet.
just talking about the
Hold on.
request.
The command car only.
We're just talking about the request.
Okay,
okay,
on the
go
bottom.
back up. Start at the top. I would
Yep.
suggest you start at the top.
okay. So that's the command car.
Right.
So now, we have two line items for the CRF for fire, the fire truck capital reserve fund. You have the CIP recommendation of 40, and an article that the town administrator put out saying we should have 90. Is that correct?
50.
50.
50. Why do I have, sorry, my typo. Sorry, my fault.
Yeah.
Fire trucks, 50.
Okay. I guess there's a number of things like that. As I understand, can I just ask the question? There was a draft of the CIP with all budget numbers, and it came up with the 10, the 40, and the 5, and the 16.8, et cetera, that right-hand column on page 5. And then at another meeting, where'd all these other numbers come from? Who came up with them? Did the committee go through it and change those one by one collectively? Or did a new draft just show up at the next meeting with a bunch of different numbers on it?
The numbers under the TA funding recommendations were gone through line by line and voted on at a CIP meeting, and they were approved. And the bottom line.
The 10 and the 40 and the 5 and the
Yes.
16.8,
The
that's
tw-
all.
No, the
right?
12, the
No.
50, the 7, the,
Right.
yeah, the
Oh,
left-hand
sorry.
column was approved.
So actually, this, for the fire truck vehicles,
Oh, right.
Scott includes the command vehicle in here at a funding it at 50 grand.
No, no.
Yes,
Yes, I read
Yes.
that too. Yeah.
it's the second item. This recommendation comes due to the projected replacement of the command vehicle at an estimated
Yeah.
cost of 60 grand, and a fire truck in
On his
2019
narrative that he sent
at
us.
an
from
estimated
memory
cost of
today.
450 grand. The CRF currently
Yeah.
has 395
Let me see
grand
if I have
and
it.
change.
The second.
This will still
Yeah.
maintain a balance of which,
I think it was just a
Okay.
handout
Anyway.
today. Greg.
50 grand.
He might not have
Dog, your
gotten
hand
it.
out, that's what you have over
Oh,
there.
yeah.
That looks
That's
like
Scott's
that's it.
report that we just received this evening.
So I
Actually, it
repeat,
does
is
seem
it
to
60,
think that.
is it 100, or is it 50?
Well, it sounds like that's what this,
If that's
I
what,
understand.
What's his yes.
All right.
and that's what you had talked about previously. I'd say 50 grand if that's what the committee had previously discussed and
But-
Scott's.
But
And
is that doing it on a basis of lease purchase, not purchase?
No.
No, it was.
No,
pur-
no.
it was
That was
purchased.
not, you're
Because
you're
it
drawing,
says-
you're drawing a conclusion which is not based on fact yet.
Okay.
And it's not a
what
criticism.
is,
just-
okay, what,
Just- It is, my criticism is that there was no full financial impact and strategy developed on lease purchase versus lease versus outsource versus, that's my point. So
Right.
normally you'd be correct, but that's not correct under this
Right.
scenario.
Well, but if you just do simple.
if you read the
arithmetic-
report, it is the assumption that it would be lease purchase.
Well, simple arithmetic.
Never, no, it's
says
not,
that
never mind.
That's for the fire
command
truck.
That's for the
vehicle's
fire truck.
60,000, the fire truck's 450. That's 510,000. 50,000 plus the balance does not pay 510,000. So somehow that's gotta be financed in some way, right?
But the two, one or the two of them, yeah.
And he
The
said
way them, yeah,
make a down payment and maintain a lease payment of 40 to 50,000.
Right.
Doesn't that say lease purchase?
right, for the truck, fire truck that is due in a couple years. It doesn't mention
For the fire.
the command vehicle specifically.
No, and that's why we have $40,000 that was voted on to put in for fire trucks.
Yeah,
Then the 60,000 is a separate issue.
Well, no,
I'm
no,
not
no, no.
Well,
The difference here is that the CIP in combination has 100,000, 40 plus 60. The TA's recommendation for the same combination is 50,000.
yeah,
But we didn't, we don't want to drain down
well,
we didn't want to drain down the CRF. And that's why the 60,000 is separated out. And that's why some of these other issues in the requests are separated out. We don't want to drain the CRFs.
I don't think Scott's has that intention either, and he's specifically addressed that by saying this will still maintain a balance.
right,
Mhm.
yeah, see, I
So
don't
he
know.
specifically addressed that issue.
But the 60,000 is a separate issue.
It is not. It is in the CIP's mind, but it's not in Scott's mind.
Yeah,
Well,
I'm seeing,
no,
Well,
we
it
have-
was on his.
If you're
his
looking at
form
this
too.
page here,
It's on the bottom
you
half
have
of
the
his-
$40,000 for the fire truck.
That's a CIP's mind. I'm looking at
right, I'm
Scott's
looking
mind
at
here.
Scott's,
But this was
narrative.
Scott's as well.
Yeah, no, I read that,
50 includes.
Okay.
This came,
Let's
but
move on.
it doesn't. That- We have to be careful here. We
I
did
think
not-
I see what you're seeing, Greg, because even Scott's narrative, he's crossing things up. He's calling it CRF fire trucks,
right.
but the command vehicle is currently not part of that equation.
That's correct.
He knows that. And in fact, we've had discussions
All right.
with him
Well,
during
again,
Board of
there's,
Selectmen, so
again,
he
there's a-
understands.
there's a
this.
gap in the
Yeah,
narrative
no,
here.
but he
So,
understands that as part of this.
Well, you're looking at this, and this is the finished product, not this.
But the,
well, I'm not going to ignore,
Well, yeah, this,
Why don't we send it back to the CIP committee to figure
They're
it
not
out?
gonna take it. We spent this,
I know.
look, we went
There's
through
a
this,
mistake here.
we went through this. We had 10 meetings. We went through each one of these items here. We went through Scott's original, of this page. And we sat down and went through each one of those and how we wanted to
and
fund them.
voted to
And we
approve
did
them.
not want to, we did not want to pull any money from the truck fund. So we set it at 40,000, but we realized even if it's passed for the CRF, for the truck and the command car, we still don't want to take the $60,000 from the money that's in that fund now. We want to have a separate amount of money separated out. That's why it's under the 2017 requests.
I'm gonna make a suggestion, Scott. That this- We mentioned we may be able to go through lines and then do it as a whole. This is probably one we need to do as a separate vote type thing. So I'm gonna make a recommendation that, make the motion that we, the planning board, recommend a wording change in the current warrant article for fire vehicles to making sure that it includes the command car, ability to use that for the command car, and that we fund it at a
Okay.
level of the TA's recommendation of $50,000.
But
That's the motion.
I'll second that motion. So we can discuss it.
okay, discussion?
I have a question.
Yep.
Just because these both came from Laura, and they both say TA on them, and he has TA on the CRF, fire vehicles, 50,000, and he has 2017 request fire command car, 60,000, and then he has his narrative, which includes both the fire truck and the command car at 50,000. So it's jumping around a bit.
I think
Right.
that was to expl, I think that was.
Let's-
to
can-
can-
explain
I'm
that
gonna-
that was-
Try and split the difference here between Greg and Swen's and modify the motion to make the funding instead of 50,000, 80,000.
So you're making an amendment to the motion
Amendment,
to fund at 80,000.
we didn't, yeah,
Motion's been made and seconded, so it would have to be an amendment to the motion.
yeah. I'll make an amendment to Swen's motion for the funding item to be 80,000, which is half of the police car, excuse me, fire command car,
Plus the 40.
plus the 40.
40, that'd be 70 though, wouldn't it? 30 plus 40 would be
You
70.
said, what was your motion, 40 or 50?
50.
Yes, 50, 50 plus 30.
Well, I'm going off the TA's recommendation.
I know.
If you wanted to do half the command, that'd be 30 plus the 40 would be 70?
No,
Okay.
I'm adding,
Your 80 is 8,
So
okay.
you're
Your number's
adding
8.
30,000, you're adding 80? or
adding 30 to Swen's motion for funding it.
Well, yeah.
Is what I'm doing. I get-
Your
I-
amendment, which has not been seconded, but your amendment was to,
I'll second it so
To
we can still
replace-
discuss
Okay.
it.
yeah, because I was going to restate the amendments to make sure we knew what was seconding. Your amendment was to have everything out of the motion as is, except change the number from 50 to 80. So that's what you're saying?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
There's still money in the account that will cover it. If you're doing, see, the whole problem with this whole process is none of this stuff is planned out forward. So we're all, as far as I can tell, we're all somewhat guessing on how much of a bite the account's gonna hit in 5 years. Because the numbers aren't in the sheet like they normally are in these reports.
Right.
That's what kills me. I'm guessing.
This is concerning me, because we're going backwards here, because we're gonna see our tax rate oscillate.
I know,
based on
I know.
Not knowing what the hell we're doing.
I know.
Exactly right.
Right.
I mean,
May I say something, please?
Yeah,
How we arrived at this was, we're not guaranteed that this will pass. We're pretty certain it will, but we're not guaranteed. So if you put fire command money into that CRF and it doesn't pass, then that money that you put in is no longer going to go to the command car, it's going to go to fire trucks. What we were trying to do here is keep $40,000 just to,
But they
Per
were
year.
suggesting to change the wording as well,
well,
so it would cover
One-
command car.
if it passes.
right.
But then you're still taking $30,000 from the money in the CRF now. So you're draining
Yeah.
that account by 30,000 and you don't want to do that. What we're trying, I mean, your whole synopsis was we want to build these funds up so we can pay for it. This vote that you're looking at here is going to do the opposite.
no,
You're
based,
gonna drop by $30,000. If the warrant article passes, you've lost $30,000, which you're now going to have to take from the fire trucks.
from what I see from Scott, he's saying 50 grand, and I'm going back to what he has on print, dated today.
50 plus
November
30.
29.
But when we went over all these funds and went through these recommendations, he agreed to the 40,000. That would be enough for the funding for the fire vehicles, fire trucks,
No, he did not.
I don't think that's
If
accurate,
there's
Craig.
60,000,
I would challenge
in a
that.
separate
discussion on
amount,
any
and
of
that's
these.
why we had it on.
I would
We have
challenge
a-
that statement, but let's
We
move
have a
ahead.
motion and a.
We have an amendment,
and
yeah,
an
right.
amendment. Any more discussion on that? Yeah.
I'm very confused because there's one number of 50,000 that comes from the town administrator.
Right,
There is a second set of numbers that comes from the CIP committee
Right.
that adds up to 100,000.
Right.
And now we're saying 80,000, which seems to me to be just an arbitrary choice. I mean, how much money is actually needed?
And that's the,
I don't
that's
think
my
we
argument,
know.
that there hasn't, and Scott's argument, there hasn't
Right.
been enough detail presented.
I
right,
don't think we actually know. I
right.
think we're
We
kinda
don't know,
making up
because
numbers here.
if you look at page 15, you've got the rescue pumper, the forestry, engine 1, ladder, and the expedition, about 8 to 15 lines down, right? Rescue pumper
I'm
is
sorry,
not on the
what-
schedule, forestry is far out the schedule. Engine 1 is due to be replaced in a couple of years at a cost of $450,000.
But it,
I know, but the problem is, I don't know how much is a down payment
Well,
It's
whatever-
not
it's whatever we
in
have.
here.
Right.
And we
That's
It's
have-
whatever we
that's
have,
an
but,
arbitrary date. Peter said that vehicle is going to last longer than that.
He said it's.
then it shouldn't be on the 2019 list.
Well, not only that, but that's an argument to not fund as high this year.
I know, that's the plastic one, right? Engine 1, is that what the plastic body?
Right.
Yeah, last year we talked about that, and you said, yeah, that's gonna last another an extra 5 or 10 more years.
But see,
So then why
That's
is
our
it on
argument
this
to say
list?
There's enough money in what was just proposed.
And that, I think that was Scott's reasoning, because there's almost $400,000 already in
Right.
that CRF. So if you put in another 50, I think he feels
Yeah.
that would cover the command.
That does sound like it will.
But Greg is saying that he ultimately agreed that 40,000 for fire trucks is adequate
No, he
if
didn't.
there is 60,000 for the command car.
Right.
Right.
That's
No,
what
he-
Exactly right.
No, he didn't. I was on the committee
No,
as
no, no,
well.
no, no, you said Greg was saying.
Greg is.
Oh, Greg said, I thought he said Scott said,
No.
because
Okay.
Scott did
Well,
not
that's
agree
what
with that.
Greg says Scott said.
All right.
Scott agreed to these amounts.
To the
If he
amended
wouldn't have
amounts?
agreed to those amounts, we would not have put them down.
You ready to vote? Everybody ready to vote? I'm ready to vote.
Call question?
On the amendment, yeah, I'll call the question.
Okay. All in favor of the amended motion?
No, amendment.
Of the amendment first,
Yeah.
to change from
50 to
50,000 to 80,000. All in favor of that motion?
Aye.
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 All opposed?
Nay.
Yay.
I think it's 3 to
Carries.
2.
Who's
Carries.
You
abstaining?
didn't vote.
I said aye.
Yes.
Oh.
It's 3 to 2.
3 to 2. 3 to 2 in favor.
Okay.
Okay.
Now for the motion.
Okay, so next motion is the amended motion. That the,
Change the wording and.
change the
80
wording of
and
the fire
80,000
truck
now.
capital reserve fund to include the purchase of command vehicles and to fund it this year at a rate of $80,000. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
No.
Oh, no,
I would have to vote aye for that also, by the way.
With those 3 ayes?
Yeah.
One opposed?
Yeah.
Got a couple extras going here.
yeah, I either have to abstain or I'll be opposed. I'm opposed just because I don't have enough information
Okay?
to vote from.
Did you vote, Terry?
Yes, I did. Aye.
So it's again 3 to 2.
3-2.
3 to 2. So that passes. Okay?
God, are we done with that one?
I think we're done with that one. Okay? Finally.
Can I put Jeff in as my
Yeah,
alternate
I
now?
think that's a key. There
I'm done.
there are a lot of.
No,
Yeah, that's a key issue. I just want to,
Please.
okay. I think when
So you're at 80 or 70?
80.
80.
So when the board of selectmen, there are 2 of you here, so listen. When you go to wording this modification of that account, make sure it includes any kind of vehicle,
Yeah.
like a boat.
No, that's a different fund.
Yeah, that's
that an ancillary fund?
Yeah, ancillary equipment. yeah.
Is that the ancillary
Yeah, you
equipment?
know, it should be vehicles,
Rescue on
any
the.
fire.
What about mule? Is that ancillary
That's,
equipment?
yeah.
All right, I just want to make sure that it covers what we want it to cover
Yeah, I think
and doesn't overlap with everything else.
you want to include trucks, SUVs, and cars. you know,
Yeah,
things like
all
that.
right. Okay,
Moving on.
moving on, finally.
Okay, you
Where
still
are
have
we
the
going?
first one on this transfer station. And again, I think that one, and there is one other that I think we're gonna need an individual vote on, which we'll get at the end,
All right,
but the rest of them probably can go pretty straightforward. Yeah, I can put that on that one. But you want to just take it line by line?
May I ask a question here?
yeah.
So down under request, you're not going to request or put in the fire command car now for 60,000, is that correct?
That's included in the fire
It's
vehicles.
included
wording
under
change.
that amended motion.
So the 100,000 becomes 80,000.
Right,
Pardon?
right,
The 100,000 combination becomes 80,000.
correct. Your 40 plus 60 was 100. Is what you originally wanted, total.
Right.
Now it's 80. Okay? That's our recommendation that you guys can, once it gets
May I
to
make
you.
it-
Do
Here's
the-
here's my
please.
concern, and this is why we separated out. If it doesn't pass,
Yep,
you've just put $80,000 for fire trucks.
Which is tied to the
Well-
wording, that is tied to the wording.
no, it's all in one motion. Actually, if it doesn't pass, the fire truck doesn't get anything.
If you.
If it's all in one
again,
motion.
The wording of the warrant article is going to be up to the board of selectmen.
Yeah.
So,
You can split it in 2 warrant articles or do what you want, however you want to flavor that. Okay, so,
or to a petition, could be a petition too.
right. Yeah, you don't like that, so.
All right,
We want to look at the other numbers here?
transfer station?
Yeah, 12 versus 10 versus Scott's Scott's recommendation was 12 versus the CIP committee voted
And,
10.
there's $4,000 currently roughly in the,
Yeah.
as a balance, so.
Do we know why that was decreased?
No, there was no discussion. Each one of these was recommended by Mr. Anthony and Mr. Bernal. There was no discussion on any of these decreases, and they were voted as a block.
Well, we did
I
discuss
had
each one of
requested
them,
that they be
and we
discussed by
asked
line
Scott,
item.
He had 12, if we went to 10, would that harm his thinking on this? And he said no, so we went to 10.
What Scott said was, that is the committee's decision, is what Scott said. That is the committee's decision,
But we took his input.
which wasn't in favor or against. It was just saying,
That's not.
This is one of the areas where, in my opinion, the committee fell short. And I think things like, recommendation $10,000. The committee recommends that $10,000 this year and next year is prudent. I think that's the right one, right?
Yeah.
Capital transfer. Why? If it's adequate to replace the equipment that's needed,
Well,
then
yeah,
that's correct. If it's just arbitrary,
no.
you ask for 12, I'm gonna give you 10, that's arbitrary.
Yes.
So, and it doesn't say here
Yeah, what we did is looked at
where
the,
that came from.
we looked at the schedule, which is the last page, page 15. And there's a hopper that's, a baler that's coming up in 2018 for $17,000. And if you only have 4,000 in there, you're going to need money for that. Plus, in upcoming years, it wouldn't be bad to have a little cushion. So that's why we came up with 10 this year, 10 next year, which would be 20, knowing that you're going to have to replace that baler next year, or in 2018, for $17,000.
Is there any other equipment?
That's coming up now.
Well, you have, for the solid waste, you have 25,000 in 2022 and 5,000 in 2022. So you have $30,000, which is about 6-7 years out, roughly.
And we're not saving for that.
Well, that's where I was gonna go on next. You currently have $4,000. If you funded it at 10, that would make 14. And they're recommending under this, although CIP would be a different recommendation next year, but right now it's recommending another 10 next year. You're gonna spend 17 out of that total of 24, you leave 7. And then from the period of 19, 20, and 21, you'd have to make up $30,000.
Right.
Right, so you carry the 10,000 each year. But that's up to another CIP committee.
Right.
But what we're trying to say there is, to cover the cost of the baler, you should, not only should you do the 10 this year, but you should do it next year also.
Yeah.
The missing part is that, the lifespan of the baler, this is what, 91 is when it was purchased? Is that year, is that the year?
Yeah,
So it's been 25 years roughly,
right,
so.
And the lifespan of it is 20.
right,
So we've got extra years
Right.
on it, but
I guess the point is, if you're at 10,000 for a period of 4 or 5 years, you probably are okay, but you can't let this one get to 0 in any one of
Right.
those years, which is
Right.
okay. I don't have a problem with that.
right,
And we're not saying to do that either.
Right. So, the difference between 10 and 12, you can argue.
right.
I don't have a problem with either number.
I'll tell you our thinking, so when you go through here, we wanted to make some reductions in some of the original requests by Scott,
Yep,
because we did something different this year. We started increasing the amount for the ETF and the town building improvements. That's gonna be 30,000. We have the ETF for the computer and office equipment at 10. And this is the key that we haven't been doing, an ETF for the accrued benefits liability fund at 25,000. So what we were trying to do is, where we could squeeze a little money out on the CRFs, and we looked at when these pieces of equipment were gonna come up. We wanted enough to cover it, but we also wanted to move that money then down to these other fundings of the ETFs.
Okay, so, again, I'm okay with either of those, whatever the planning board feels is appropriate.
all right. I guess I'm not gonna, I wanna move forward, I wanna argue, I don't wanna spend a lot of time arguing about a couple $1,000s there.
So what
Let's-
number you want? Consensus?
Can leave it as is fine.
10?
Leave it at 10.
You okay?
Fine,
Let's-
fine with 10.
Is that consensus?
Bob,
Yeah.
okay?
Yep, that's.
All right.
I'm good with that.
All right,
That's what I think the fund.
so next is highway equipment purchases. For $5,000.
It's, 5 or 7, yeah. Hard to feel. Highway equipment's 5 to 7.
That's another one that's not well justified.
I know, that's what.
I'm sorry, Jeff, what
Did
was
you
it?
I said it's another one that's not
Yeah,
well
yeah.
justified.
The TA
I
as well.
didn't read the TA recommendation.
6. I don't know what is considered under highway equipment, what's in that pool.
Yeah,
The tow broom, obviously, but I don't know what else and how much it's gonna cost. So it's hard to, that's really hard to call.
Only
The
talks
chipper,
about-
So-
the balers, the backhoe,
There's a lot more.
Is it?
involved
is that,
yeah.
Yeah,
Loader, all that kind of stuff.
isn't there?
Actually,
actually,
let me
no,
make
it's
sure,
the
let me
backhoe.
come back
I
off
thought,
that. Let me come back off that.
Not
I think it'd be
baler.
the chipper, the broom, some of those things.
yeah,
See, the combination here is that you have the tow broom for 10 grand,
right,
which should be combined with the 5 grand,
yeah,
because all that can come out of highway equipment.
right. I mean, that's the kind of stuff, you wanna privatize and offload rentals, that's the kind of stuff that should be short-term rental. A chipper or a tow broom.
Sorry.
Exactly,
I could buy that,
right.
I could agree to that kind of thing. Because you can practically go to Taylor Rental and rent those things.
Well, some of that's done already. I mean, it is some of it.
You know, we already have a chipper, so we should use it until it's dead.
That's right.
And something like that can last decades.
That's
Unless you
right.
don't put oil in it and you blow the motor.
That's right, and we don't use it that often.
Right.
And the point there is exactly why we did those 5 issues. You rent it or lease it,
Oh,
rather than
Anyway.
purchase.
Well, the
So-
point, the point here is that the 5 grand should be combined with the 10 grand of the tow broom. If, again, I'll go back to what I was saying, I think there's some confusion on expending versus funding.
yeah.
But making the assumption that these are CRF funding things, it should be 15 grand for the highway equipment purchases.
Like the trailer, the backhoe, I guess.
I'm not sure the backhoe.
Well, I mean, he said,
don't know.
he said expenditures in 2024, so I'm looking down that column on the last page, and that's all I'm seeing.
Yeah.
Isn't
So-
that what he
Uh,
pushes all the brush around?
F-150 pickup.
Yeah,
I don't call that a backhoe, but.
yeah, that's definitely backhoe with the thumb. He squashes the recycling bins, he packs them,
Yeah,
moves brush and such around. That's get used a lot.
okay. So again, the total is 15 grand, not 10 grand. Sorry, not 5 grand.
Oh, you mean on the page 15, it says 10,000 for the tow broom for 2017.
Yeah,
But does that come out of the fund that has 126,000?
Yes.
So the entire 10,000 doesn't need to be funded this year, correct?
That's right.
again, to go back to what I said before for the 3 or 4th time, I think there's some misunderstanding in the CIP of what is the difference between a reserve funding decision versus an expenditure decision.
Well, this was Scott's reasoning that he explained to the CIP committee about the highway tow broom. We can take that money because there's money in that account. However, he was thinking we didn't want to reduce it. So if we set aside that money in the request part of it, we could buy the broom outright, or if we needed to, put it into that fund. Now, I don't know why you decided to do it that way, but we went along with him on that.
Yeah.
So,
I
I mean, I don't have a problem with the 15.
We also, this Baylor in 2018.
We're talking highway equipment purchases.
Plus the broom down below. Because that comes out of CRF.
Okay, because the recommendation, Scott's recommendation was 7, the CIP's was 5, and now you're saying 15?
Well, I'm just adding those two
He's adding
together.
Because he's
the broom
adding the
together
tow
with the,
broom. Yeah.
Okay,
I mean, Jeff has a valid point, is that there is a reasonable amount in there,
right,
but I'm not, but the look hasn't been far enough down the road to say,
right.
is there really enough funding over a period of years to ensure we have coverage to avoid the spikes as Bob has indicated?
And that's what you have on page 15, that shows you what's coming up. And once again, like Scott said, some of that, rather than purchasing it, you could rent it. And so we looked at all those issues.
It would have been nice to have these identified by CRF.
Yeah, I was just
sections.
saying that, because there's no way to tell what's under what.
Yeah. But, I mean, you can
It's not
kind
even
of, you
sub-
can kind of group it, but it would have been nice to
Yeah,
have it
they're
identified.
sort of, they're basically grouped in order
Yeah.
of account, but
I know where,
not clearly.
he got the $12,000 for yearly, replace cost per year would be $5,000 for the backhoe, $3,300 for the ton trailer, and $1,000 for the chipper. So
If you read Scott's explanation, you're right, the 7 grand does do that. It says the recommendation comes to a scheduled replacement of the tow broom, which covers
Right.
that. For the highway department, it's going to cost of 10 grand, which matches what they suggested was
Right.
going to be the price. This
Yeah.
will allow for the fund to be maintained,
I'm
which
ready.
is what you want.
I'm ready to,
Continue to contribute, so maybe 7 grand to be
I'm
it.
ready to either leave it at 5 or just up it to 7.
Yeah.
7 is what
well,
I don't have a
keeps
problem with
us on
7.
schedule. 7 keeps us on schedule.
Is that the consensus of the board? Up it to 7?
I concur with that.
Any
Okay, I'm
objections?
okay with that.
Any strong
what
objections?
happens to the broom?
All right,
It's purchased, it's covered,
Okay,
according to Scott's narrative.
all
By
right.
the CRF.
all right.
It comes out
So
of CRF.
simple consensus without
Yes.
argument is we're gonna up that to 7.
Now, the question I have is, I have one which needs a fair amount of discussion. Do you want to do that, which is related to the highway? Do you want to do that now, or do you want to do it at the end? It's not on the list.
Not on the list. Let's talk
I-
about highway stuff now. Is it
Okay.
part of this CRF or is it something
No,
different?
it's part of CRF. It's what I referenced in my overall goal statements,
Okay,
which is the trucks.
highway equipment purchases
Highway, no,
is the highway
highway
trucks.
trucks.
Okay. Sure, let's stick with the highway department. Before we move on to something else.
So, just quickly, the highway truck fund has roughly $230,000 in it now.
Right?
If you looked at on page 15,
Yep. We're looking at
kind of look
losing,
at those groupings visually.
right. We're looking at,
Comes,
we're gonna go through a lot of money very quickly.
It comes after the mule.
Yep.
I think it starts with the 01 GMC, right? And goes down to the broom. more or less.
Yes.
The GMC, I
That's
think, is
different
just
now.
a basic truck. I don't think that's not a plow. The International 7400 is the first plow.
Yeah, well, I'm just saying I'm just saying that's
Yeah.
the section of the description.
Yes.
It goes between the
Yep.
01 and the 15, basically.
Right.
And if you look at what's going to be required, you've got,
It's
say,
a ton of money.
yeah, you've got 360 plus another 180, it's 580, 540, I mean. You've got 540 thou to 570 thou due in the next 6 years.
Yeah.
You're not funding it all. in the
If we
current-
stick with keeping all the trucks ourselves,
Correct.
if we stay that route, we're looking at a
You
lot of
have
money.
currently, what did I say, 500, or
You full
230?
purchase rather than lease purchase, we were looking at lease purchase.
You currently
We're
have
looking at
230.
half that. We have about half that. Currently.
Say that again, I'm sorry.
Over the next, we say 6, 8 years or something, we're looking at
500 and-
$540,000 in expenses if we keep owning and maintaining plow trucks. We currently have about half of that in the account, which means we have to, if we maintain the trucks ourselves, we need to add $230,000 over 5 years. 5 to 8 years.
If you
About 40 or
purchase
50,
it outright.
about 40 or 50 grand.
Right,
Roughly.
about 40 or 50 grand a year.
And that would just break it, that fund even, by the way.
Right, that would keep it even. If we, that's the,
I have great concern about going that route, and
Yeah.
Which route is that?
the route of not
Yeah.
saving toward trucks. And I said this earlier, but I'll just say it again briefly. I think this is a big deal. I think it's a
Yeah.
big deal to the people of this town.
Yeah.
Some people may not mind. If you live on Main Street, it's taken care of by the state, and
right,
straight across from the fire department, who cares? But if you live where I live, you care a lot.
yeah,
I think that making this kind of a change without having debate and discussion with the town is just inappropriate, and I don't think we should do that.
right,
I would like to see, my recommendation would be fund replacing these trucks for the time being, and fund a town highway department for the time being, and in the meantime, have a discussion with the town. And decide, how do we want, something you said is not inappropriate, I'm not disagreeing
No, I know what
with the
you're saying.
concept that,
right,
you work it in maybe one truck at a time, and you do it
Right.
1 year, and you assess, and you see, does that work? But I just feel that it's not financially justified. There's an assumption here that this is gonna save a lot of money. How much money?
right,
Is it gonna, because if it's gonna decrease my taxes $3, and I risk not being able to get out of my house in the wintertime,
right.
I don't wanna do it. I
Right.
don't care if it's
Right.
gonna save
I don't
money.
know how, yeah, I don't, these studies are supposed to be floated around, I've never seen one. So, I don't know how these things work, are gonna work. I don't know what other towns have done and what kind of track record they have.
Even-
Have other towns of at least comparable size to New Durham done this 5 years ago? And have a track record to say,
Yeah.
if we were spending X dollars a year to maintain all our trucks, and 5 years ago we started contracting and now we're spending X minus Y, saving Y every year.
Because this
We
this
do
is
have-
not- just real quick, and I'm
No.
sorry. This is not strictly a financial issue. in
No,
my
I
mind.
mean, it obviously has to be a
This is a
service
cost-
level also. Are we
cost
happy
benefit.
with that savings?
This is cost benefit.
Yeah.
Are we willing to take the risk of what we might lose for the savings that we might gain?
Yeah.
And I think, as I said before, everybody's got a different threshold for that.
Yeah.
I don't think that kind of decision should be made by a small committee of folks who may have the right intentions of saving money. I'm not saying they're bad intentions, but I just don't think this is the right vehicle for making that kind of decision.
Well, CIP, there's 3 issues here. One is, and the first 2 is from CIP, is how are you gonna purchase these? Are you gonna, if you're gonna pay them outright, the full amount, then you're gonna have to up the funding.
Yep.
Second is,
Yeah.
if you wanna start with the idea, which we've done before, a lease purchase, then you can drop down that full amount that you would have to raise for the
Right.
purchase. Those 2 issues would not change the services that we're giving now to the.
It would not change the service, correct?
That's right. The third issue then becomes, and you're right, there's gotta be more of a study, which there is a study out there. Tony did an extensive study of half a dozen plus towns, and it showed the comparison on, some of them just outright got rid of their complete highway department and subbed it all out. Some did the blending half and half, and some are similar to what we're doing, and just buying equipment outright and so forth. That's the third issue that, I don't think, you're right, we're not really talking about that right now. But we're talking about how are we going to fund these trucks? And our recommendation was we should start going into more lease purchase rather than full purchase out. And that's why we reduced the amount that we were putting into this fund.
I guess I still don't understand why
And
lease purchase is better.
There is no reason.
You know, I know
why
I
we
need to
can't-
buy a truck in 5 years. It costs, I'm using round numbers to keep the math simple, $100,000, right?
Let me
Let me just give me a couple
I
minutes
can
here.
answer your question fairly quickly.
All right, Go ahead and answer it.
Why
Let's
people
ask
do
you
it.
if it-
All
In
right,
a for-profit business, people do it because they can take the least part off their operations and have as part of their tax net profit results.
we can't do that.
Right, that's the point. On a municipal point, part,
It's a
it
business
makes no
expense.
sense to do it.
Right, for a business
Because
owner, it's a business
unless-
expense.
Unless there is a cash flow issue, which is the other reason to do it.
Yeah,
On a cash flow issue, if you don't have sufficient in your CRF, as an example,
yeah,
then it makes sense to do it. The implied hidden secret here is, it doesn't save the taxpayer a dime, and in fact, it probably costs more.
you've got interest.
Exactly.
Right, because if I know I need a truck in 5 years, and I know it costs $100,000, I put away $20,000 for the next 5 years, and I'll get a 0.5 or 1% interest gain on that balance,
Right.
tiny amount, but something.
Right.
And in 5 years, I'll have the money, I paid for it, and I
And
start
continuing-
saving for the next truck.
Right. So,
But if I do lease purchase, I don't have to save $20,000 a year for 5 years. But after I purchase it, I have to put out $20,000 plus interest for the next 5 years to pay for it. So it's either putting 20 grand ahead in the bank before I need it, or paying 20,000 plus interest after I need it. That's the difference. And I don't see why paying interest after the fact is better.
I don't need this, I think lease purchase makes sense if there's a traumatic breakdown.
Right.
And you're not ready.
And you don't have the money
Yeah.
for it, then yeah, you can't afford to buy the
that's
whole
cash
thing
flow
out.
yeah.
But you've got 80,000 for down payment. You know,
Yeah.
That should be the exception, possibly not the
Yeah.
rule.
I think so.
But that's my opinion. I agree with.
Unless
Jeff,
by
though.
some magical thing, a lease purchase costs less
Well,
than a purchase, but I don't think it does.
I would say, going back to what Greg had mentioned earlier, that the cost, trying to get the cost down for the town as a whole, and what costs the town the most, from what I remember what you said, was really the benefits. of
Doesn't
the
save a
employee.
dime, costs more.
Well, that's still a
No,
different
but-
argument.
That's
Factor,
underpaid.
you know, contracting the whole truck out and never buying it in the first place is a third argument.
Yeah,
Right.
Well, that's right.
And it should,
It's a
that's-
separate third argument
that should
that
be
we're not
looked
even
at.
there yet.
That should be looked at. I'm not
It should be
arguing
looked at,
shouldn't.
but that's not where, not where we are now.
Okay, but the CIP did look at that. We looked at 10 years out, and we looked at, do we need all these trucks? One. Two, can we not replace certain trucks in the future because we're gonna start contracting out?
But did you do an analysis, and did the committee discuss an analysis of how much contracting costs?
Well, I
Yes or
personally-
no?
I personally did.
If you
Tony
didn't
pers-
come, if you didn't, did it come, go through the committee, yes or no?
Well, we knew that in the background. We did not
Dot,
discuss
did
it.
you know that in the background?
No.
Then it didn't go to the committee, say so, please. Okay? You personally have looked at it,
Right.
It did come up.
but the committee
last
didn't
year.
discuss it.
Well, we discussed it. We didn't have,
There wasn't,
we looked at certain
Okay.
trucks.
it wasn't a complete financial analysis.
Okay, that's what needs to be done, and it was not done.
Okay.
That is
Well-
my whole issue with
And in fact,
the
if I
theory
can-
of contracting. It's not been discussed in an appropriate setting.
If I can speak for the highway department head, when he made his presentation, and I asked if he could do without a certain piece of equipment, but they were recommending that, and he said absolutely not, that equipment is used 2 or 3 times a week, all year long.
Even the plow trucks?
He no, it was the
Okay.
grader, it was
Wow.
grader.
The
He
trucks, not the
independently
plows.
made a statement that, and he was referring to the, kind of the analysis that Tony, Mr. Bonanno had done, who sat on the committee.
Right.
I mean,
Understood.
he said, I have information, and he just said that information is very flawed. That I guess you really need to talk to Mike Gringas, because he said, I have checked on the information in that report and found it to be very flawed.
What we've asked for the last couple of years, at least what I've asked for is, each day, what does an employee do? What truck does he use? Each one of these trucks, and we asked this of Mike, and he did not deliver that information, which is the key information, is how much usage do these trucks get? When are they used, and how much time is used? And that was never done. He had a nice picture of a truck, he explained that this truck can do this, this, and that, but he never put the numbers for us to understand what pieces of equipment are being used year-round versus what pieces of equipment aren't. And part of Tony's study was that he had that information from other towns. We have yet to get that from the last 2 years. Now, we've asked Scott to please do this now. We have a secretary over there, start getting these numbers for us, so we can look into the future and know exactly what truck we can replace or not replace, whether we're gonna do a lease purchase or just lease a piece of equipment. For instance, when we were doing the culverts, we leased out a large excavator for the month. We're not gonna pay for a new excavator, we're gonna lease it out. How many more of these vehicles can we do it that way? And what the savings can be done. Now, the study that Tony did, which I looked at several years ago, then he did another study, the savings are great. That's why some of these other towns, they keep the same services, but their costs are quite different than ours. We're doing something wrong because it costs us more money to maintain our roads than in these other towns. And I want to know why. I will not, and I agree with you, I will not reduce the quality that we have of removing the snow and the truck, the roads and so forth. We also, and that's the issue that we're talking about, and we looked at this, I looked at this 10 years down, Tony looked at this 10 years down, and so did Dennis. Because we looked at these studies and got that. And so, you know, if you want a great analogy and so forth, that's fine, I don't have a problem with that. But other towns have already done, you don't have to invent the wheel. And that's my whole point about this whole thing. If we're gonna start funding everything the same as we have before, our expense for these roads are gonna be greater than other towns pay.
The department head did include, in his report, did include the number of hours the truck
Department
was
hasn't
in service.
validated.
No, he did not.
Yeah, anyway,
All right.
let's go
Well,
to, you know, is the consensus,
where are
first
we?
of all, to fund trucks, and if so, how much? I think that's the key question.
Yeah,
First
That's-
answer is
that's-
definitely yes, on fund trucks.
I think so. Until
Consensus?
there is a
Like,
thorough
So the
analysis,
consensus is to fund trucks in some amount.
I think so.
You know, for me,
If that's the case,
you know,
then we're gonna need a lot of money.
for me, you know, I think you need to
I
maybe look at
understand
the
that.
number.
So we've got,
You've got 230,000 in there
right,
now?
I mean, if you look at the list of trucks we have,
230.5,
right, I don't know how much money we have, but if we just look at page 15,
right,
if you look at the list of trucks we have, the International, the Freightliner,
right.
the 09 International,
You've got
the 11
540, right.
International, and the 12 F-350, that's just a basic truck. Well, I'm just gonna stick to the big ones. 5 trucks. They need 15,000 a year. That's the replacement cost per
50
year.
you said, right?
15,000 a year. 1, 2, 3, 4, 4 trucks.
Well, Scott, do we have a guide here, highway, on Swenson's table? Highway trucks, 88,633. Original CIP, 0. Sorry, Anthony's changes, 0. Is the
Well, that was
80,
Scott's change,
is that the,
you know.
okay, well,
As a matter of,
Did he actually put that on that report?
Wait a minute, which,
changes.
This is from Swen. This
That's
is from
Swen,
Swen's
yeah.
report.
That's
the
what-
funding
This
recommendations?
is
One-
But
what
here,
TA did.
is this Scott's recommendation, 88,633?
No.
No,
What would be needed, or
no,
where did
that comes
come
up.
I don't know where
That comes up.
You are.
Scott's recommendation was 0.
that's-
Okay, but is 88,000
I
what's
disagree
required?
with you.
I don't think that's correct.
Oh.
I
Sorry.
disagree with you. In fact, Scott's summation of that is, when you eliminate a truck, you eliminate a job. That was his final statement on that.
Oh,
Let me make a comment here. I mean, if we look at, you know, 6 to 8 years out, and I just use 7 as my arbitrary number,
There it
of
is.
540,000, and you want to keep, you know, the current balance, that would be 75,000 a year funding. I'm not sure that we have to keep that current balance, but I do think you have to keep a continued amount of funding going into that part. So I would look at anywhere from 50 to 75,000, $80,000 as being the amount that should be recommended.
Mhm. Like I said a minute ago, if you just look at what it costs to maintain those 4 trucks, replacement cost per year in the report is 15,000 each. That's 60,000 a year.
Yeah. So that's why, you know, so 50 to 75, you got 230. I'm not, you know, I'm not saying there's anything magic about that number, but you want to keep some balance in there. So it's somewhere between 50 and 75, which is 60 is.
Yeah.
Last year you funded at 55,000.
So it's-
Well, there you go.
it goes right into the.
I don't,
Right into the rationale.
until there is a clear, I mean, I think it really takes, it's gonna take, it really should probably take a town meeting, warrant article to say, fire truck, sorry, plow trucks are gonna be contracted out in some
Well, there's actually. a more-
scattered, some step pattern over the
There
next
is a
10
more
years.
subtle
or
deal that's
something.
going on, which you've already nailed, quite frankly, in that it may not take a town meeting necessarily until it's too late. What I mean by that, if you don't fund the trucks,
We
you
want
get
to
to a point
trucks.
where you can't replace them and say, well, we have no choice, it's just gonna cost too much to do.
That's,
Right.
that's
So
my concern.
that's what I'm trying to avoid.
Right.
I'm trying to make sure we have a conscious town decision on what to
Yep.
do strategically.
But you're
That's
funding
the
them
point.
at the full price and not even considering the lease purchase.
Oh,
Because I don't
lease
know,
purchase costs the same to the taxpayer.
We
It
can
does.
Come
see-
on, it costs more actually.
Well,
Somebody has to pay the interest. The difference is
you
cash
pay
flow.
for it
The
ahead of
difference is-
time, or you pay for it after the
Right.
purchase.
If
It's
you're
the
gonna
same
keep-
amount of money.
If you're a
gonna keep the
for-profit,
trucks-
as I said before, if you're for-profit, lease purchase makes a different sense because it has some tax impacts.
Right, you write it off as a business
Some
expense.
income tax, net profit
But-
tax impact.
But we've already done it in this town, the lease purchase.
Yeah, I know, and I don't,
Absolutely.
honestly, I don't really know why we did it, because we had to, not because it was financially
In
beneficial.
a town situation, cash flow is the rationale to do it when you do it. That is, you don't have enough to do the whole shebang. So
Wait till
you-
you see the bottom
Spread.
line.
Yeah, it's gonna be a lot of money, I understand that.
It strikes me there's a consensus here to fund the,
Yeah.
the capital equipment for highway trucks, and
It's
certainly Swenson's recommendation of 50 to 75,000 in that range, and to suggest that there is some kind of a concerted, directed effort to develop a plan that's financially justified and that's distributed widely to the town.
I'll second that motion.
No, well, that wasn't my plan, but.
If someone
It actually
wants,
has been argued, I've argued that multiple times at Board of Selectmen
I
meetings over
think,
the last year and a half, so.
I mean, you're not a,
that needs
he's
to
an
have a full
alternate that's
strategic-
not,
I'm not voting tonight.
I know,
Right.
but can he actually make a motion as a
No.
inactive alternate?
No.
I'll make that motion.
Make that motion, I think that's perfectly
Well
worded.
stated, yes.
Okay.
I think that's perfectly worded. The planning board recommends that the highway truck account be funded at $50,000. Do we have a quick consensus on that number?
Seems to make sense.
Mhm.
Okay.
I say
And that a
50 to
concerted,
75.
how'd you say it, a concerted effort be made in the next
Concerted
year?
directed effort be made to develop a plan for implementation of contracting of services. Something like that.
That motion I would not be able to
Then
vote
reword it.
for. I think what has to be done, which I've been advocating for a year and a half or 2 years, is that you need to have a long-term strategic plan and analysis, financial analysis part of it, of how the highway department should be functioning. Whether it's a full town-owned process, a blended process, or of which some is contracted out, some is retained, and if so, do we own the trucks and rent the people, or do we rent the trucks and own the people, or, if you understand what I'm saying, or a full contract out.
How-
But that's what has to be done, is a full strategic analysis of what the options are for the town, and then have the town vote. on it.
Word that in a motion.
That would be the motion.
That is the motion.
So I've been advocating that for,
Do you,
More than
can
a
you
year and
make
a half.
words out of that? Try, restate it in a single sentence.
well, first of all, I would suggest 2 different ones. One is that you
Okay.
fund it at 50K.
All right, let's do that.
That's the
Start,
number.
hold,
So,
hold
I
your,
think that was.
let's do that. You made that motion.
Yep.
Second,
Okay.
fund the highway
I'll
trucks.
second that.
Swen's seconds, any discussion?
No.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That's unanimous, okay?
Okay. And then for the second part of the motion, just more succinctly, that the planning board recommends a full strategic analysis, both in terms of financial impact and service levels for highway department operations. That's pretty simple,
Period.
Okay?
right?
Got that?
I'll second that.
Swen,
All right.
just for the record, we are in violent agreement.
Any discussion on that motion? We had a motion,
I think, no, Dot second.
Dot second. Any other discussion? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Unanimous. Okay, that's done.
Okay,
Now
so
let's
that's
move
50K for
forward.
that. And then we have the police cruisers, right?
Yep, I think is that pretty good? I think that's pretty good, isn't it?
The difference is 16.8 versus 20, but again, I think partly in the, you have 68 and a half in there, so
Close enough for government work.
I think a police cruiser can cost anywhere from 45 to 55, 60,000, depending on how
Okay.
much ancillary equipment you put on. So I think we're okay for 16.8, right?
Yep. Okay,
Now, the library should be a combination between the 5 and the 8.
someone's phone is ringing.
Pardon?
I hear something vibrating, but anyway.
And if you make that combination, I don't have a problem with that.
Library, where are we?
It's the library facilities at 5, and then down below, the library exterior painting carpet replacement at 8.
I'm not sure where you were.
Just as an FYI, full disclosure here, my recollection is that 8 only covers half the library's carpet, and the next half will be done next
That's
year.
right.
Right. One room, then the second room, kind of
Correct.
thing?
And then it does cover the exterior painting required, but it only covers half of the carpet, just to make sure everybody understands.
Does that
So,
make,
but I'm okay with the 13 if everybody else is okay with that.
well, just,
And the paint.
from a logistic point of view, from the way the library is concerned, does that make sense? I
I
mean-
don't think, I didn't hear any. I mean,
Did they
I
wanna
can't- I
do it
attended
one
as
year and the
as a
next?
resident, but I didn't hear any
Or-
objections.
Critical is the children's room,
Right.
because there are tears and we have them cited,
Right.
so.
But I'm just wondering, how do you replace the carpet?
You got the center section there between. Makes it
Where do you
easier.
put everything? when you're
The
replacing
one
the carpet?
section. They can do it in a day or two,
Yeah.
so it can be done,
All right,
over a weekend or something.
all right.
And they wanted, their furnace is very old, and they put in the new heating units, but should they not be able to maintain the temperature below, when it goes below 20 degrees?
But I think there's enough in the CRF already to cover that,
Right.
there's almost
And then-
$5,000 there.
Exterior painting
Right.
was their other request, yeah. And that goes into town building improvements.
Yeah, it says 4.9 thousand current fund balance.
Yeah,
So they put the air conditioning units in last year?
yeah, I'm missing in the CIP narrative, why, in this case, are there two lines, 5,000 plus
And that's what I'm saying, I
8,000?
think you gotta put them together.
Is that
Well, I know
the
they're
wording
not listed in
of
the CRF portion of the
the,
front
is
table.
the CRF not allow
Yeah, it can,
painting versus carpet?
No.
That doesn't make sense,
No.
so
it can go, it's facilities improvement,
that's what I thought,
so there's no reason to separate it out.
that's what I thought.
That's why I made a note, not listed in the CRF portion of the front table.
So we
It
just
should be.
add this,
Yeah, so that's why I'm
to-
saying the 13 total is okay.
yeah,
Okay,
yep.
Yeah.
everybody okay?
We have a general consensus, the library
Yeah.
CRF goes from 5 to 13,
Mm-hmm.
okay? Because we don't need this requests line at the bottom. Okay?
So instead of 5,013 and you strike the 8?
Right, yeah, it's the,
Yeah.
that's how you get to
Right.
13, is the 5
Right.
plus the 8.
Right, okay? Okay.
Yep.
I'm going down to, which way are we going here?
Public safety facilities, is that?
Public safety facilities.
Sure.
I'm trying to go through the narrative as well as,
Yeah,
I mean, there's the difference. Da-da-da-da-da-da. Okay, now I thought in the narrative, page 8,
Upstairs. I can do it.
I thought there was more to it than
I
that.
love them both, so, because they're two sides.
Oh, that was in,
it's at page 8.
yeah, page 8, and then Scott's report on top of page 2.
Yeah, there's
He,
$2,500 difference.
$2,500 difference.
Yeah.
How much is, I don't know if that really makes much difference to me.
There's 100,000 in the fund.
Yeah. I thought wasn't the town hall just painted a couple of years ago?
Needs it again now.
No, it was actually painted probably 6 to 8 years ago at least, not more.
Was it that long?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Lawrence was still alive.
I thought it was just a
It was,
couple of years
it
ago.
was at a
It
cost
seems
of,
it, yes.
it was at a
Or was
cost
the
of-
north, just the north side painted last year or 2 years ago?
Yeah, there was some, may have been some touch-up
Something.
work done, but
Maybe that's what's
I
throwing
think,
me off.
I mean, the discussion that I recall around
Alright.
this was that it cost something on the order of $40,000 or $50,000 to do everything.
Yeah, there's a lot of scaffolding, that's a
Yeah.
big building.
And scraping and all that stuff.
Right.
It's old wood.
Right.
I mean, it's-
Uh,
this is public safety facilities, not the town hall.
right, right, because they want renovating the fire station, because, okay,
Yep.
I guess I would,
There's a balance
Support.
already, there's a balance already of a little over $100,000 in the fund.
right.
So
Which is
I'm
good.
okay with the 5.
Yeah, let's, is anyone, consensus, we leave that at 5? Public safety facilities,
Yeah.
all
So
right.
on your report, what does SWF mean?
What is what?
SWF. On your line for public safety, you have 100,000 in fund, October 2016, and 228,000.
Solid waste facilities balance.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Okay. Milfoil is the next line. I find it hard to believe that they don't need any money.
Well, let me give you a quick Reader's Digest version here. The Milfoil Committee has done an exceptionally good job over the last several years in terms of getting attacking the milfoil issues
Right.
and all of that, and pulling a variety of mitigation strategies, which, based on what they said, has worked extremely well.
Yeah?
They have some money in there already, as $26,000, I think, but I'm not sure that all this year's payments have come out of that yet. So there's likely to be $10,000 to $15,000, I think, left at least
Okay,
after this year's payments. And they've indicated that they may not need to treat excessively, I shouldn't say excessively, as much as prior years next year, and they've said they really don't need additional money.
if they don't think they need it.
I think that's a fair synopsis.
Yeah,
Yeah,
they withdrew their.
they,
request,
yeah, okay.
Victims of their own success.
But the corresponding add-on here is from an operational point of view, the Board of Selectmen did add some monies, not to the milfoil side, but to another line item with having the milfoil having oversight of that activity for addressing some of the cyanobacteria potential issues.
Right.
So it wouldn't come out of this, but there's another operational piece that the Board of Selectmen's already funded a fairly
Right.
low amount, $1,000, but for testing and things like that.
Right. We need to get the phosphorus out of the.
So I'm okay with the 0 too.
It was a worthwhile investment, too.
Yep. Okay. What's the issue with the Smith ball field improvements here?
Well,
The playground equipment is not part of the ball field,
it should be,
but,
but for this 5,000 refers to, I believe, the maintenance and upkeep, which the highway department had been previously doing. They are shorthanded, they are no longer able to do it, so we need to,
That should be operational, though.
That's in the operational
Should
budget,
be,
is it?
mowing and
Wow.
things like that. yeah.
Okay, that was the justification she gave, because we have fields that really need some,
Well,
need to be addressed.
I think,
Well, I'm not talking about routine mowing, weeding, or whatever,
Right.
I'm talking about irrigation, repairing the irrigation system, just repairing the fields, retaining walls, work on the, bike, not the bike path, the walking path.
Parks and Rec.
I think, again, I did not look at the warrant article wording of this. I did not go back that far to see it. It may be that there is sufficient wording there to allow the playground equipment to go in under that CRF.
Yeah.
But I can't say that for sure.
Yeah. Greg,
But
could
having
you-
said that, in reading Scott's information,
yeah,
he's including that playground equipment in
Right, I
that
understand
overall
that.
CRF.
Greg, can you state why you split the ball field improvements in two lines?
That was-
4,000 for maintenance and 7,500 for playground equipment?
I recall when Nicole came to us, she needed additional money for the ball field to make the improvements, which hasn't been done in the past several years. So we specifically put that money for the ball field. And then there was specific money for the playground equipment. So they're separated out.
Okay,
So
but is there any reason it can't come out of the same CRF?
I think
guess-
there's a reason, and I don't know what it is.
Because Scott seemed to indicate, and he probably knows, it sounds to me like they should come out of the same account.
yeah,
So I would,
the way Scott's phrasing it looks like to me.
I would say we just roll that into the other
That'd
CRF.
be 12.5 then. Right?
4,
No, it's 5 plus,
70,
it's 4, sorry. I had
4
five.
plus
It's
75.
11.5, yeah, I had 4, I had 5, but it's
Yeah,
4.
originally it was 5.
I'd like to advocate because we really do need work on our walking path down there, and that really was a goal in the master plan to provide additional recreational activities. We want to expand the walking path.
I was looking at Scott's recommendation, which
Right.
was 5.
So I'm asking 12.5.
Now, there is, as we said, there is, where's the ball field? 9.8 already in that fund. Okay, what number do you want?
Yeah, what's our, if we just combine the two accounts, the two lines, it becomes 11.5. There's, like Swen's just said, there is a balance of nearly 10 there,
Okay.
so that should be covered. So increase that to just combine the two Smith Ball Field improvements to make that line 11.5. Okay?
Okay.
Ancillary equipment in the fire department, 5,000, that's agreed on with Scott, so I'd say leave it be. Right? Fire hydrants, I don't have good answers. I've asked this question a couple of times, and I've not gotten what I consider a decent answer, is how many dry hydrants are existing in town that are functional? How
There are-
well
there are not
spread
very
out
many- yeah,
are
not very
they?
many, but-
And how many more can be installed? You know,
Yeah, that part I don't know.
you know, what's the long term, in 20 years, how many dry hydrants does the fire department want? I know that it's cheaper to install a dry hydrant when you rebuild a culvert, because you're already tearing up the road anyway. So that's when they tend to do them. That's fine. But what's the long-term plan here? And I've not gotten a good answer on that.
Doesn't that integrate with growth of the town as well, and particularly in the village area? I mean, you want to
It should.
anticipate growth.
You want to have water capacity, yeah. That's what causes
I think
fires to
if I
destroy
remember,
the whole house, is there's no water.
if I remember the discussion, and I don't remember if it was last year or sometime during this year, I think that there's 12.5 there is enough for 2 hydrants, if I recall.
Yeah, Scott says it's 4 to 5K per hydrant,
Yeah. So that's about right, yeah.
about 2.
I didn't read that part. but-
That's in Scott's narrative on page 2.
Yeah, yeah. So
Um,
my recollection is pretty close.
yeah. So the current fund will support approximately 3, maybe 2 to
Yeah,
3.
that's at the 4 level.
Right. I don't even know how many there are in town,
I don't either. I
or
asked
how
that question
widespread they
last
are.
year.
Are they all in
And
one
where
place
they would
because
need
that's where all the
them.
rivers are?
The only place they talked about was over on Copple Crown last year. They
Right.
would need them.
Right, there's one, I don't even, they currently exist primarily where the river crossings under a road,
Yeah.
and there's a culvert. I'd be happy to have one installed in my fire pond down at the end of Old Bay Road, because there's nothing down
I
that
think
whole
you
end
should
of
put in a
town.
request.
There's no culvert there, but those
There's a
3
pond.
ponds were specifically man dug in the 60s as a fire pond.
There you go.
That's their purpose, so I'm inclined to add at least $2,000 to that. Maybe you should add $4,000, I don't know, $2,000 this year, $2,000 next year?
I think we need to know where they are
Yeah,
and where the need is for them.
yeah,
There was,
Greg, before you go, I have a question for you on another line item here, so don't go until we have that.
so do you want to add $2,000, and do we want to give a recommendation that the fire department come up with a long-term plan?
I would like to see a
There-
long-term plan.
there was supposed to be one done. This came
I've
up
asked,
back,
I have asked for one
This-
several times.
this came
and I've never
back
seen
up
it.
when Chamberlain Way was put in, because there's a cistern or 2 there.
Yeah.
The Barron parcel, which is Middleton Ham Road, this is the mid-2000s.
Right,
So
I have
don't know if
asked the
there-
same question
so there-
multiple times and never seen an
Yeah, well,
answer.
something better materialized,
Okay.
'cause
Yeah,
To move it along, I'll make a motion that we
Yeah.
fund this, I'll make 2 motions.
Yeah.
One, that we fund dry hydrants at $2,000.
yep,
since-
Second,
okay. Any discussion? That was Swenson and Turi.
Yeah. And then secondly, I'll make sorry, you need to vote first, yeah.
Any discussion on that? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay,
All right,
second
and then
motion?
Second motion is that the planning board requests a hydrant plan and recommendation for the town.
in
Yep.
in current locations,
Pardon?
current locations.
Yeah. Hydrant plan and recommendation and current locations, okay,
That the fire
for the
chief
town.
or fire department,
I
whoever,
don't, yeah, I'm not sure who, but
that aid,
fire department makes sense, but whoever, but just to recommends that we get that.
Just a minute.
That's my motion.
Second,
any discussion on that?
Okay.
All in favor?
aye.
Aye.
Okay,
Mm.
now the next one, I didn't find anything in the narrative on this one. There is narrative on the
Okay.
one that corresponds at the very bottom.
Okay, we
One
have,
minute, please.
hold on a second, what do you want to talk about
Are
here?
you gonna do these minutes tonight?
No, we're not doing the minutes tonight.
Okay, thank you.
So
Where are we? Try
Greg, just for FYI, this is the one I wanted you to make sure that you were still here on. This is on the road construction.
Greg,
One is 50,000 and one's 340. I didn't find any narrative on the 50, but there is something on the 340.
yeah,
Pardon?
Scott.
Yeah, I know that, but I meant on the
but
CIP
in the
report.
CIP report,
On the CIP is referencing. Now, just as an FYI, normally the warrant article reads something like this, that we approve X dollars, in this case, if it was 340, we approve 340, with 118 coming out of highway block grant,
Yeah.
and the balance to be raised, or taking 100 out of CRF and the balance to be, some combination of that.
Right.
That's how it normally reads. But again, this is where I came to another example where I came to the conclusion that there may not be clear differentiation between CIP's understanding of funding versus spending.
Well, doesn't Scott have a recommendation here for road construction of 50,000?
yeah. That is what he says,
That's
but
not-
Is that the 50,000?
That's not road construction, I think that's CRF funding.
Right, right. Is that the 50,000 that you're
Just to
not?
build the
That's the
fund.
50,000 that I think is in that first section.
Then the 340, it says the rationale is the road agent identified roads.
So the CIP committee didn't address the 50,000.
That's why I'm saying it's missing narrative on that.
Okay.
Okay, Scott
Well-
added, but the CIP committee
Right.
did not address it,
Right.
right,
at least not in the narrative. I don't know if it's in a table.
right, because
somewhere.
the current balance in that CRF is $253,000. If
And
we're
again-
gonna spend 340,
It'd be 340, but we get a highway block grant, and I think
So it
that's
costs-
somewhere around 118, 115, 118,
So
110,
about half of
120,
it.
somewhere in there.
so you need
Well, it's not quite half, but yeah.
close.
There's an explanation. Are you reading?
I'm
that?
reading the narrative, but
No, the explanation in the CIP.
yeah, on page 10,
Okay.
right? I'm reading that narrative.
For the 340.
Yeah, normally it says which roads and whether
It
it's a
does say.
shim overlay, does it?
Yeah,
Oh,
it says
okay,
damage
okay.
And
from
that was
construction.
proposed,
Resurfacing, it doesn't say which is which.
that was
Okay,
proposed,
okay.
the DPW director has that information that was provided. I
So,
think the Board of Selectmen asked them to go back and take another look at it. We did look at it as part of the budget detail part, but haven't done any action yet on
Okay.
it.
so, I mean, this is one of those funds that in my mind, it almost doesn't need to be a CRF because whatever gets put in this year is gonna get spent,
No.
pretty much.
No. Otherwise.
A lot of it gets, a lot or most of it gets
Yeah,
spent every year.
Well, you wouldn't have the,
250
200,
there.
yeah,
True.
if that were the case.
So, well, if we add 50 to 250, right,
Right,
we get 300,
right,
and we take out 118,
right.
we're still leaving
But what you
180
do want,
something.
a certain part, and I think the recommendation is somewhere at least about $100,000 to $150,000 for
Yeah.
emergency road stuff. If
Right, that would do
Something
that.
gets ripped up, right.
This would be on a warrant.
Right?
Pardon?
Yeah, I know.
Okay.
I didn't hear you, Greg?
This
said-
would be on a warrant.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. that'll
And
be-
normally this is a separate warrant article, it's
Right.
not combined with some of the other
Right,
CRFs.
right. I mean,
So I think,
the problem is that the narrative calls for 340,000,
right,
but the
Plus the
table on
50.
page 5 calls for
50.
50,000.
Well, 50
That's
plus
a separate-
140.
yeah, it's 340 at the very bottom.
Well, yeah, that doesn't make sense though.
Let me,
Jack it's heavy.
is the
It seems to me that adding 50 to 200 something, right?
yeah,
You have 250 in the account.
Right,
If you add 50,
right.
you get 300. You take out 118,
Well, you add 118 more to that from the highway block grant.
but then you,
Then you take the 340 out.
then
of
to
that
take the 340
combined
out,
one. Right.
you're gonna end up with close to 200, just a little less,
You got
180 or
150,
something.
yeah.
180
And
something.
I think that's the
That-
point here.
Yeah, I don't see the need to add 340,000. I don't see that at all.
Well, our thinking is we're gonna start funding moving from dirt roads to surfacing roads.
Well,
Yeah.
that's.
I don't think that's gonna be economically viable.
Well, we're starting.
Don't think that's gonna be economically
We're
viable.
starting with 340,000.
We're waiting on some economics, but every
I don't-
financial analysis, or study I should say, but everything I've seen is in the neighborhood of $800 to $1.2 million a mile.
That's what I thought was $1 million a mile.
And that's not my number.
I mean, that
That's
may
not
be-
my number, that's numbers
That
that
may be more of a
Scott's mentioned.
first scratch road though.
That's
That's correct.
Scott's mentioned.
$1 million for building a road through the woods.
Right.
Mm.
You've got a very strong gravel base on these roads.
Yeah, but you don't have
It's not wide
stormwater
enough.
management that's
No.
appropriate
It's
in
not
most of
wide
these
enough.
roads.
No.
So I mean, that, if you don't do that right,
Yeah,
you're just throwing
Understood.
money right out the window.
We now have a study that's looking at the dirt roads. They're doing core samples on certain roads to see what the base is going to be, which will give us an idea what the cost of that particular road will cost us to resurface, or to surface from a dirt road.
This 340 doesn't have anything to do with that, quite frankly. This
That's
340, no, it doesn't. This 340 is for those roads that have been outlined by the Highway Department Director, the DPW Director, I should say, or roads that have been identified to surface or resurface. I
That's
should say.
correct.
So that's the bracket, the Old Bay
Resources.
Road, the.
The Old Bay Road,
No, 50,000 was the.
Not Bracken
issue.
Road.
Right, but the
But
three.
Old Bay
Bracket
Road,
listed.
He's
some of Birch Hill, I think,
the 340.
so, all right, so the 340 is
strictly
for known
resurfacing.
expenses to repave and
Says
repair
correct.
known
reconstruction.
fixed roads.
Uh,
You
it's
want
not-
to add
that goes
50
from-
to move forward
from Birch Hill
with paving the dirt roads.
Yeah, that's kind of a separate issue we wanted to.
Well, that's not how it's written in the narrative, and that's what bugs me.
Okay, yeah.
It's not, that is completely unexplained.
Lo-
in the narrative.
Lower, yeah, that's bracket.
What
So,
page is it?
I don't mind that idea, but that's not what the narrative says, so it's confusing.
Okay.
But that's
What
where
page is that on?
340 is.
Well, the narrative is on page 10
That's only 340.
of the highway road reconstruction paragraph.
Which is what we want to set aside,
Um,
50 plus 340.
So do we just leave it at the 340?
Well,
Or do we
there's two
add-
parts. There's the 50,
Yeah.
which is the funding of, new funding for the CRF. And then there is the 340, which is,
Right.
I'm not sure why we deal with that, because that's the expenditure out of that fund.
Right. We're gonna spend
I mean,
340.
they have done it in the past. It's been in CIPs in the past, but I'm not sure.
Well,
That goes on a warrant article, the 340.
I know, but
So
that's
does
not
the
the
50.
issue. Don't-
The 50 goes on the warrant article.
Right. Well, what Greg is saying is the 340 is to be spent this year to repair
2017.
those roads that are described in the narrative.
That would be, that's correct.
Right.
The 50, as
It's
I
funding,
understand
it's
Greg,
funding the CRF.
is to fund the CRF to move towards paving the dirt roads.
That's not correct.
That's what Greg is saying, is
He's- well,
whether.
That may be his belief,
Okay.
but that's
Well,
that's not
What
correct.
about if we look at
Sorry,
what Scott wrote for the 50,000?
what did he put in?
He says, this
For-
recommendation comes from an historical contribution, but more important, to build the fund for reconstruction of roads which are the most expensive. The current work has been focused on pavement preservation.
Right.
I'm not sure exactly what that means.
Well, that's what we're talking about, yeah.
Maintaining the integrity.
That-
of
Which
the
is what I'm
road.
saying.
That's- yeah, that-
Basically, I hadn't read his part, but that's. basically
Scott's
what I'm saying.
narrative is more consistent with what Swen's has just been saying, in my opinion.
So is the question, do we want to reserve 50,000 plus 340,000?
That's the question,
Just one of those?
Yeah.
right.
Historically, the CIP report has had both parts. They've indicated that they wanted to fund this highway CRF at X level. In this case, it would be 50.
Right.
And then they have another paragraph that says, we expect that expenditures from this would look like this, which would be the 340 less the 118, less whatever appropriations and other stuff, well, less CRF. plus,
Right.
you know, But, so there's two parts in the report. The main action is how much you're gonna fund here, because the expenditure piece comes out of the warrant article that will be developed and approved by the voters,
Right.
and or
Right.
denied by the voters.
So, I guess I'm still a little bit, so we
The
just
way,
had,
the way to get around it maybe, and just to throw it out for discussion, maybe around is that the planning board will recommend funding road construction CRF at $50,000, if that's the number everybody has a
Yeah.
consensus on. And understands that that CRF would be used up to $340,000 for road,
right.
that
Well,
would be
that's, yeah, I think that's almost a given.
with part, yeah.
It's just the
But I,
narrative,
I'm not sure you need that second part.
No, we don't.
The key action would be, what do you want to fund it at?
Let's just leave it at the 50 then. I don't think there's any, unless I'm missing something.
No, you're fine.
Okay, so we're gonna leave that at the 50.
Okay? And then the 340 is just noted as, this is how
Right,
it's
that's
thought
how
to be
much is gonna
spent.
get spent this
Right.
year.
Ah. So that's not actually being reserved as new money going into the
Correct.
fund?
No, that
That's
340 is not new money, it's not part of the budget.
Okay, so does that mean it should be deleted from this?
I
list?
crossed it off this, the
Sorry.
bottom of that page 5.
Okay. Well, the answer is yes.
Yeah. I'm not gonna put a total together on this, I'm gonna let someone else do
Okay.
that. Meeting house,
We're almost there.
yeah, I know, 10 grand, 10 more grand. Greg, you sit on the meeting house committee, right?
No, he doesn't sit on the committee.
Well,
His
you've
wife does.
been showing up to it,
My
whatever.
wife's a member, so I go.
All right, what's going on?
Well, we just got a report back from Steve Bernard.
Yeah,
It's 2.5 pages
yeah,
explaining what he wants to do
yeah,
for the meeting house.
yeah,
And he explains that, and that explanation is going to LJ.
okay,
But he goes into detail of the foundation, why we're gonna do the foundation the way he's considering it.
yeah.
He
Is
wants
he still working with the reinforced concrete thing, or is he doing dry
Yeah.
stack?
No, he wants to do the concrete with steel pins
Yeah.
into the ledge
Yeah,
to anchor the building.
yeah,
That's that direction.
yeah,
And then they're talking about taking the roof off because the roof is failing. Then that will expose the beams and so forth, and there's a stress in some of the beams. They're gonna look at that and see what needs to be replaced and so forth.
okay.
And
Maybe
that's
it'll
Steve.
level detail it.
Right, well, I just 5 minutes, 2 minute summary here. Okay, has there been a meeting of the minutes? As I keep looking at the meeting house website thing, on the town website,
They
looking
have
for
not met
minutes.
for a while.
Okay, when did the report come out?
We
We
just
just
got
got
it
it
like 2 days ago.
2 days
Okay,
ago.
can someone send it? Who do I talk to, Kathy?
Scott can, yeah.
Scott
I'll
will
talk
get
to
you a
Scott to
copy.
get a copy.
Scott
All right,
can-
Yeah.
I mean,
Okay.
it should be public information.
right,
Yeah.
okay. Okay, so is 10,000 sound, how much is in there?
No, there's quite a bit in there because we voted,
Right,
the town voted this past year
it's
to
40,
fund it,
it's
to
100,000 in
get,
there.
yeah.
Yeah, it's about.
That was to cover, you know,
110
foundation
plus the
stabilization
stamp.
and some of the exterior work, et cetera.
Right, so there's 90, right, for the count? Yeah, 98,000 in there.
Well, the L
Plus,
chip will
plus
come
the
in.
L chip
Plus
is
the
another
plus the
13,
13,
roughly.
Yeah,
yeah, so, okay, I will certainly get
and they approved that. It-
the L chip approved the delay again?
Yeah, it's-
Another
for the
year?
addition, yes.
Fine,
Extension.
extension, right, so add
10K.
10,000 or leave it as is?
10's okay, 10's okay with me.
10's okay, all right,
Is that okay? I mean, anybody else?
Mm-hmm.
Terry?
I'm sorry,
Fine.
I'll go for it, yeah.
okay.
10,000 for the meeting house.
This is the last one you have to combine here.
Yeah, which,
The town hall energy upgrade should go into town building improvements. I believe.
right, 21. Where did 51? Okay, that makes sense to me. Any dissension?
No,
Town building improvement?
So that would
Change
be
the
a
balance to
total of
51?
51. Now,
Okay.
the discussion part here is that there is a fair amount already in there.
Assessment,
There is,
exterior painting, winter roof replacements, energy upgrades, approximately 120,000. It has 97 in it. So that'll leave
I was
20.
thinking something close to
There's
100. so-
97.6,
Okay,
but they factored that in and recommend 30 more.
yep. Yep. So, wait a minute though. Where'd the other, where's the, hold on. Town building improvement.
On page 12.
Yeah, that's 30. Where's the other 21?
Well, that's the part is that's missing. but
Right. So where's the other,
Again,
in the
this is what I'm
narrative,
saying,
Greg?
there's
Page
concern between
12,
what's expended
right.
versus what's funded.
30.
The narrative says town building improvement 30,000.
Right.
Where's the other 21? that you have on the bottom of page 5.
Scott wanted to pull that out and have that as a separate under the request.
Okay, because it's
and
not in the,
include it in the
it's not in his notes either.
No,
30,000.
Yeah, so it's not, the 21's not there.
The 20 the extra
One
20
could
that's-
argue that the 21 couldn't come out of the 30 plus the 97.
Yeah, I don't know where that 21's coming from.
Well,
It's
that's
not
what I'm
even-
saying, I think there's confusion between what's
Yeah,
expended versus what's funded.
okay. Should we just add the 51 and go forward?
Well, Scott, just for the record, Scott notes that the 30,000 should include the energy upgrades. He
Yeah.
says the recommendation
Yeah,
following an assessment of the facility showed the need for painting, window replacements, and energy upgrades.
yeah,
So it looks to me like his
Right.
30,000 included that.
Well, that's what I'm saying, I think it's the 97 plus the 30 less the 21. 21's expended, this is where again I started to draw,
Yeah.
there are several examples, this is the,
Oh, is this another one where that's how much we expect to spend this year?
right, and 2017, yeah.
yeah,
Okay.
That's my interpretation based on the combination of information that I had.
okay.
So we're not setting.
So the
aside-
30,000 would
so
be
we're
the
not,
number.
it's not 51, it's just 30?
It's 30, with 21 being spent.
Oh, so it's just 30.
It's just 30. with
There are a
21
variety of
being
ways
spent.
to interpret, that's my
Does
interpretation.
that sound right to you?
No, but that's all right.
Well, see, that's, you understand all the confusion here? It's not, it's,
Well, I
it's,
was confused also with this request, how they were separated out from CRF and ETS.
yeah,
And Scott's explanation was, on some of these, was that he wanted to have that money set aside so that we didn't deplete some of the CRF and ETF accounts. And so it's an additional amount.
okay, oh,
The CRFs and ETFs have clear definitions, but.
yeah,
but
okay,
anyway,
so, and that's it?
So it's very.
I think 30 will cover
I
it.
mean, like the road project,
Which
with 340,000, that's a separate, because we're gonna put that on a warrant article.
Yeah.
So each one of these is
Right.
gonna be identified
Well,
differently than.
right,
All of these go on
everything, every
warrant.
single thing here is in a warrant article.
That's correct,
See, that's what, you say it's in a warrant article, but everything here is in a warrant article.
will be.
Separate warrant, separate or
Well,
something.
it's either combined or separate,
Right.
depending on what the
Right,
decision is.
Everything's gonna, my point is, every single thing in this report, if it's gonna get any money, has to be in some form of a warrant article.
That's right.
So that's,
So
Okay.
are we
I
just
think
now,
we're done.
are we
Well,
just
pretty
now
much.
realizing that everything?
Last three ETFs, right?
What?
Office
Oh,
equipment.
Oh, computer
Sorry.
and office equipment.
I'm
Yeah.
pretty much happy with them. Forest fire, maybe add 2,000, that's different.
Office equipment at 10K,
That's fine. I think that's,
and crew benefits.
I don't know anything about that.
Okay, that,
So I'm
do
gonna leave
you
it
want to
alone.
know or not?
The both
Yes.
numbers are 25.
Yeah.
Scott's numbers and the CIP's numbers are about 25, so
Yeah.
I'm gonna leave that alone.
Yeah.
Forest fire
Just
control
from
is
the point of
different.
view of use, it's used for people that retire and have payouts
Yeah,
requirements.
I understand what it's for, I just don't know
Yeah.
how much it needs. I'm not familiar
Well,
with
it
it.
was severely low.
Yeah, I just don't know how much it needs.
And forest
Forest fire
fire.
control, why is that different?
It's a separate ETF.
But why is the
Well, it's got a balance. of
The CIP committee
24,000.
thinks it's adequate, and Scott thinks you should add $2,000 to it. That's what I'm wondering about.
I think the
The
has 20,
CIP,
almost 20, over 24,000 in it now.
right?
Right.
I don't think it's been used a whole lot.
I don't, that's why I'm asking.
Yeah.
The CIP
I don't have a
committee
problem, I
says
don't
it's
have a
good.
problem with CIP's approach to this, but
Does that sound familiar?
Maintain
Maybe because
balance.
there's been a lot of fires lately. There just has.
Where is that?
That's my
I'm
other
glad we're not in
question.
Tennessee.
Why did Scott
Yes,
want to add
exactly.
2
If
to
our
it? I
drought
don't
were to
know.
continue, I'd say put,
He just put a
fund
number
it.
there, and after we talked to the fire department, they said, no, what we have in the funds is fine.
Yeah.
So that's why we see with it.
I guess I'm inclined to leave it be. I don't know, unless
Leave it.
someone says something
Leave it
else.
0? Yeah,
Zero.
Okay.
I don't have a problem with that.
Okay, I guess that's it then.
Yes,
Right?
thank God.
So what
So we
I
just
might
make all
suggest
these
is having, I would suggest just simply putting a table together of these changes,
Right now.
along with the additional motions that were made,
Right.
and give it to the Board of Selectmen and Budget Committee.
Yep,
Right, I mean, I don't know that you have to go back and rewrite a whole new report.
no,
It's up to you.
Yeah, so how's that gonna come about? Is our note taker futurely on camera gonna be able to assemble all of that?
Mhm. There you go.
I can,
Can you talk to them?
Talk to Scott in the morning.
Laura, because I've already had this pretty well set up as a table, I can just put this in. If you can take care of the motion pieces, i.e. those that had special connotations, if you take care of those, I'll give you a table with this summary. You can just verify the numbers and use
And
that,
then just put the motions at the
Beautiful.
bottom of the chart.
if that's okay with everybody.
That's perfect.
Because I've already
I
got
don't
this
have
thing
to do
set up with Excel and all that stuff,
So
so.
that I don't have to do.
That would be
I love that
greatly
idea.
appreciated.
I'm making a motion.
Well, no, not yet. One more very quick thing. Take 2 minutes.
Uh-oh.
Kidding?
This is for next meeting.
Okay,
We
yeah,
have
no,
December 6th as the next master plan
okay,
review. Quite frankly, this one I used virtually what we had and just
Right.
culled out and reworded some things. I did add a couple of things, but not nowhere near like some of the other sections. But
okay,
that
beautiful,
is the last section, except for demographics.
okay.
I don't have another copy.
Yeah.
Oh, she'll make it. Laura, you make a copy.
Okay,
So just, just ask that you review it and come with whatever changes you'd
Yep.
like to see.
okay,
Then we'll finalize that draft,
okay,
talk about how you want to handle demographics, and then the final.
okay.
And I do
Now,
think
what
we have
is
to have
the,
I think we have to have one more discussion on revisiting the
what
vision.
are,
That's the minutes.
these are minutes that you edited already?
Yeah, that's the red stuff.
The red stuff, then you just did it already, so we're just gonna, okay,
I gave it to Laura and she.
Right. okay, so we have all your edits from the minutes for several meetings, so we can look those over and agree or disagree and come back next time. Great, anything else?
Move to adjourn.
Second.
Second, Don? All in favor?
I don't care who does it, just
Aye.
get me out of here. Aye.
Adjourned.